You've been told that if you want something, you have to chase it, hustle harder, push more, hold tighter. But if that were true, why does chasing leave you exhausted, anxious, and still empty-handed? Why does grasping make what you want slip even further away, like sand falling through your fingers? The truth is, not everything is meant to be forced. What is truly yours does not need you to beg, fight, or suffer for it. It comes when the time is right, quietly, naturally, like a flower blooming without struggle. Buddhist teachings have whispered this truth for centuries, that peace comes not from control, but from letting go, from trusting life's flow instead of wrestling against it, from learning that attachment is the root of suffering, and detachment, the gentle art of release, is the doorway to freedom. Tonight, as you listen, you'll feel something shift. The restlessness inside you will begin to soften. The grip of fear, of what if, of endless wanting, will start to loosen. And in its place, a calm space will open. A space where trust can grow, where you can finally breathe again. This is not about giving up, it's about waking up. It's about realizing that what is meant for you will arrive in its own time, and what isn't was never yours to carry. So are you ready to set down the weight? Are you ready to let life unfold without force? Then let's begin. When the truth of letting life flow naturally begins to settle in your heart, a new question quietly rises. How do you actually live this teaching without becoming cold, distant, or careless? Many people hear the word detachment and mistake it for not caring, as if freedom means shutting your heart off from the world. This confusion is dangerous because what looks like peace on the outside can easily become numbness inside. The path of Buddhism is not about turning into stone, it is about becoming light. And that is why understanding the fine line between detachment and indifference is one of the most important lessons for spiritual growth. Detachment is the soft opening of the hand that once clenched tightly. It is the ability to hold life gently, to appreciate without clinging, to release without bitterness. Indifference, on the other hand, is the refusal to hold anything at all, the closing of the hand before life even touches it. One arises from wisdom, the other from fear. One expands the heart, the other shrinks it. This subtle difference determines whether your path leads to freedom or to a prison disguised as freedom. When you are detached, you still care deeply. You love, but without trying to possess. You support, but without needing recognition. You listen, but without seeking control. This state allows compassion to flow freely because you are no longer driven by ego. Indifference blocks that flow because it tells you that nothing matters, that the suffering of others is not your concern, that love is optional. A detached person sees pain and responds with kindness, while an indifferent person sees pain and looks away. This is why confusing the two is so dangerous. Indifference wears the mask of detachment, but underneath it is emptiness without depth. The Buddha warned against craving, but he never told us to stop caring. He spoke about the middle way, a path that avoids both extreme attachment and extreme rejection. Detachment is born in this middle ground. You can look at someone you love and let them be free, knowing that love is not ownership. You can face loss with tears in your eyes, yet with peace in your heart, because you do not resist impermanence. Indifference would tell you to shut off those tears, to bury your feelings, to pretend you are untouched. But repressing emotion does not bring freedom, it builds walls. Many people choose indifference because it feels easier. If you care less, you hurt less, or so it seems. But this false comfort comes at a cost. You cut yourself off not only from pain, but also from joy. You may think you are safe, but in truth, you are empty. Detachment asks for courage because it requires you to feel everything fully while still letting go. It asks you to open your heart wide, even knowing that one day what you love will change or disappear. That courage transforms suffering into wisdom, while indifference leaves you stuck in quiet despair. Psychologists today speak about emotional suppression and its effects on the body. When you push down your feelings, your nervous system carries the weight. Stress rises, anxiety hides under the surface, and depression slowly seeps in. Indifference works the same way on the soul. It suppresses the natural human response to care. Detachment, however, is not suppression. It is transformation. You feel fully, then you release. You grieve, but you do not cling to grief. You celebrate, but you do not clutch at joy. This movement keeps energy flowing, keeps the mind clear, and keeps the body lighter. Spiritual growth depends on compassion. Without compassion, wisdom becomes dry, like a seed never watered. Detachment nourishes compassion because it removes self-centered desire, leaving room for genuine care. Indifference poisons compassion because it convinces you that caring is weakness. A detached person may give generously and then walk away without expectation. An indifferent person may not give at all, believing that nothing is worth their effort. One opens the heart to humanity, the other closes it. You might see this difference most clearly in relationships. Detachment allows you to love without chaining the other person. You give them space to grow, to leave if they must, and you still wish them well. Your love is not a cage, but a blessing. Indifference pretends not to care whether they stay or go. But this is not freedom, it is disconnection. When you are indifferent, you miss the chance to experience intimacy, because intimacy requires vulnerability, and indifference rejects vulnerability. Think of detachment as the clarity of seeing things as they are. You understand that everything is impermanent. Relationships, possessions, status, even your own body. This understanding frees you from grasping, but it does not make you cold. Instead, it deepens your appreciation. You savor moments because you know they will pass. You treasure people because you know they are not permanent fixtures. Indifference sees the same truth of impermanence, but responds with dismissal. Instead of cherishing, it shrugs and says, "Why bother?" This is not wisdom, it is resignation. The heart of Buddhism is compassion combined with insight. Compassion without wisdom burns out. Wisdom without compassion freezes over. Detachment is where the two meet. You see through illusions, but you also care for the beings still caught in them. You understand that nothing is permanent, but you still hold someone's hand when they cry. You know that desire leads to suffering, but you still smile at a child's joy. Indifference has no such balance. It uses the excuse of wisdom to abandon compassion. Consider how this plays out in society. When you are detached, you can face the world's suffering without drowning in it. You can act with kindness, volunteer, donate, or speak out, but without being consumed by anger or despair. You help because it is right, not because you need recognition. Indifference, however, looks at suffering and says, "It's not my problem." It uses impermanence as an excuse for inaction. This is a misunderstanding of Dharma. True, Dharma does not make you careless. It makes you more alive to the needs of others, even as you release your personal attachments. At the root of the confusion is fear. People fear that if they let go of attachment, they will lose passion, love, and meaning. So they either cling tightly or swing to the other extreme of indifference. But detachment is not the death of passion, it is the birth of pure passion. A detached artist still paints with fire, but without fear of criticism. A detached lover still loves deeply, but without chains. A detached seeker still pursues wisdom, but without pride. This is freedom with warmth, not coldness. The path of detachment also sharpens awareness. When you are indifferent, you close your senses. You numb yourself to avoid discomfort. But numbness dulls everything: pain, joy, beauty, truth. Detachment does the opposite. It heightens your awareness because you are no longer clouded by craving. Food tastes richer when you do not obsess over it. Relationships feel deeper when you do not demand from them. Experiences feel fuller when you do not cling. Indifference narrows your world. Detachment expands it. There is also a moral difference. Indifference can become cruelty because when nothing matters to you, the suffering of others becomes invisible. Detachment never leads to cruelty because it is rooted in wisdom and compassion together. A detached monk may leave the world of possessions behind, but he still feeds the hungry and comforts the sick. His detachment allows him to give more, not less. Indifference does not give it, only withholds. Philosophers throughout history have seen this same distinction in different words. The Stoics spoke about apatheia, the calm state free from destructive emotions. But they never meant apathy in the modern sense. They meant freedom from being ruled by emotion, not freedom from caring. Buddhism echoes this. Detachment is mastery, not neglect. It is choosing how to respond rather than reacting blindly. Indifference is simply not responding at all, not because you are wise, but because you are closed. If you look within yourself honestly, you can feel the difference. When you practice detachment, your heart feels light, open, at ease. There is clarity, a sense of being in harmony with life. When you slip into indifference, there is a heaviness, even if disguised as calm. Something feels deadened, like a light dimmed. That subtle difference is the compass of your growth. Pay attention to it, because it tells you whether you are truly walking the path or just avoiding it. Meditation can help you develop this discernment. In meditation, you learn to observe thoughts and feelings without clinging. You let them come and go, like clouds across the sky. This is detachment in practice, awareness without ownership. Indifference in meditation, however, would be ignoring thoughts, pushing them away, or zoning out. That is not mindfulness, it is avoidance. The quality of presence is what matters. Detachment is presence without grasping. Indifference is absence disguised as calm. Over time, as you deepen in detachment, life becomes lighter. You stop needing constant validation. You stop fearing loss so intensely. You begin to care more authentically because your care is no longer tangled with ego. You help others not because you want something back, but because you see them as yourself. This is compassion in its purest form. Indifference can never reach this point because it cuts off the bridge between self and other. It says, "I am separate, and your suffering is not mine." But detachment sees through separation and responds naturally. The Buddha's life itself is the greatest example. He left the palace not out of indifference to his family, but out of deep compassion for all beings. He cared so much that he was willing to walk away in order to discover the truth that could end suffering. Indifference would have kept him inside, ignoring the world's pain. Detachment gave him the strength to act for the highest good. That is the difference between closing your heart and opening it wider than ever before. So, as you continue on your path, test yourself gently. When you step back from a situation, is it because you are wise enough to release control, or because you are too afraid to feel? When you say you do not care, is it because you have seen through illusion, or because you are hiding from reality? Detachment and indifference may look similar from the outside, but inside they create very different lives. One builds a soul that shines, the other builds a shell that cracks. And here lies the essence. Detachment is love without chains, compassion without ego, freedom without coldness. Indifference is escape disguised as freedom, numbness disguised as peace. If you want to grow, to truly find the calm strength that Buddhism offers, then choose detachment, not indifference. One leads to liberation, the other to a subtle kind of death long before the body dies. This is the difference the Dharma asks you to see. And once you feel it clearly in your own heart, your journey will never be the same. When you begin to see clearly that detachment is not indifference but freedom, another question naturally rises. If we are not meant to cling or force, then how do we move through life with purpose? This is where many people stumble. They think letting go means doing nothing, or that life will somehow carry them to everything they desire without effort. Others swing to the opposite extreme and believe they must push harder, control every step, and bend destiny to their will. Both are misunderstandings. The middle path is found in understanding karma and the natural rhythm of cause and effect. To live wisely is to act without forcing, to plant seeds without pulling at the stem, to trust that what is meant to blossom will do so in its own season. The law of karma is not punishment or reward handed down by some cosmic judge. It is the simple truth that every action has consequences. Your thoughts, words, and deeds ripple out and return to you in ways you may not expect. When you grasp at outcomes or try to rush destiny, you are not aligning with this rhythm, you are disrupting it. It is like throwing a rock into still water again and again, demanding it clear faster, only to make it murkier. The natural unfolding of karma requires patience, clarity, and trust in timing. The Buddha often compared karma to planting. If you sow seeds of kindness, compassion, and mindfulness, you cannot demand the fruit tomorrow. You must water them, give them sunlight, and allow time to work. Forcing the process does not yield quicker growth, it only damages the seed. This is why rushing destiny breaks the flow. You may achieve something temporarily by pushing, but the fruit will be bitter because it was pulled before it ripened. Detachment allows you to plant without clinging, to act with sincerity, but without obsession. Non-forcing is not passivity, it is wise alignment. When you force outcomes, you act from craving. Craving is rooted in the belief that you must have something now, that life is incomplete until it arrives. This mindset is restless, anxious, always measuring progress. Karma works on deeper levels than your impatience. It carries the energy of intention. If your intention is filled with desperation, fear, or greed, the results will carry that same flavor. This is why forcing often leads to disappointment. The energy you put into the world is the energy that returns to you. Consider how this applies to relationships. You may desire love so intensely that you push yourself into situations not meant for you, trying to hold people who are not aligned with your path. In the moment, it feels like action, like seizing destiny. But the outcome is strain, conflict, heartbreak. When you allow relationships to unfold naturally, guided by compassion and clarity, what arises is more stable. Karma does not deny you love, but it teaches you that love must grow in harmony, not under pressure. Non-forcing does not mean sitting still with folded hands. It means acting with awareness, planting the right seeds, and then stepping back to let life breathe. Think of a farmer. He tills the soil, plants, waters, protects the field, but he does not stand over the crops day and night, demanding they grow faster. He trusts the process. This is the art of karma. You act skillfully, You release control. You trust the unfolding. When you force, you dig up the soil repeatedly, ruining what you planted. The rhythm of karma is subtle. Many times, you cannot see the results of your actions immediately. This is where faith and patience enter. The mind that forces cannot bear waiting, because waiting feels like emptiness. But waiting in alignment with Dharma is not empty, it is fertile. Every moment of patience is nourishment to the seed. When you rush, you uproot your own potential. When you trust, you align with a deeper order. Modern life teaches the opposite. We are told that if we hustle enough, grind endlessly, and never stop pushing, we can control everything. But look at the exhaustion, the anxiety, the disconnection this creates. The law of karma is not impressed by hurry. It responds to the quality of your actions, not the speed of your demand. Forcing outcomes breaks harmony because it comes from ego. The ego does not trust timing. The ego believes it must shape the entire universe. Karma is impartial. It does not bend to ego. It unfolds according to cause and effect, not impatience. There is also a deeper spiritual harm in forcing destiny. It feeds the illusion of control. You begin to believe that your will alone determines reality, that you are separate from the larger flow. Buddhism teaches interdependence. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything arises from countless conditions. Forcing outcomes ignores these conditions, tries to push without harmony. The result is resistance, conflict, and suffering. Non-forcing acknowledges interdependence. It acts wisely within the web of causes, not against it. This does not mean that effort has no place. Right effort is part of the Eightfold Path. But right effort is not frantic pushing. It is balanced, mindful, purposeful. It is like guiding a boat with the current rather than paddling furiously against it. When you force, you exhaust yourself and drift further from shore. When you align, you travel farther with less struggle. This is the secret of non-forcing. Effort guided by wisdom, not by desperation. Think of times in your life when things came naturally, without strain. Perhaps an opportunity appeared when you least expected it, or a friendship grew effortlessly. This is the flow of karma meeting your readiness. Forcing would have blinded you to these openings because you would have been too busy chasing another door. The rhythm of life offers what is right when conditions are ripe. Non-forcing keeps you open to receive. The danger of rushing destiny is also that you often do not know what you are rushing into. The mind imagines that one outcome will bring happiness, but because it clings so tightly, it cannot see the whole picture. You may achieve what you wanted, only to discover it is empty. Karma does not deny you what you chase, but it reveals its true nature once obtained. If you act without wisdom, your forced outcomes become teachers of suffering. When you act with detachment, what unfolds, whether gain or loss, becomes nourishment for awakening. Every spiritual tradition has spoken of timing. In Buddhism, right timing is not about luck, but about harmony of causes and conditions. Forcing ignores timing, like trying to harvest in winter. You may gather something, but it will not sustain you. Non-forcing is trusting that spring will come when it is meant to, and preparing your heart in the meantime. This patience is not weakness, it is strength. It takes more courage to trust than to push. The mind addicted to forcing often confuses action with progress. You may feel you are moving because you are busy, but busyness without alignment leads in circles. Non-forcing may look slower, but it moves in harmony. Like water carving stone, it is steady, natural, unstoppable. Forcing may appear powerful, but it burns quickly. Non-forcing endures. This is why detachment is so crucial. Without detachment, your actions are stained with craving. With detachment, you act from clarity. You still work, create, build, love, but you do not demand instant results. You let karma unfold, knowing that what belongs to you will not pass you by. What is not yours cannot be forced into permanence. This understanding brings peace. Meditation reveals this truth deeply. As you sit, thoughts arise and fade. If you force them to stop, they only grow stronger. If you allow them, they pass naturally. The same law applies to life. Forcing the mind brings resistance. Allowing with awareness brings stillness. Karma is like this. Forcing disturbs the water. Non-forcing lets it clear. Over time, you will see that non-forcing is not laziness, but mastery. It takes wisdom to know when to act, and when to wait, when to push, and when to release. Forcing is easier in the short term because it feeds the illusion of control. Non-forcing requires surrender, patience, and humility. But this humility opens the heart to the deeper order of the universe, where everything arrives in its time. When you stop rushing destiny, life softens. The constant tension in your body relaxes. The anxiety about the future lessens. You begin to notice small blessings you once overlooked because you were too busy forcing. Relationships deepen because you are no longer trying to mold others into your desires. Work feels lighter because you act with clarity rather than desperation. This is the fruit of non-forcing. Karma teaches that every moment is both cause and effect. What you do now shapes tomorrow, but tomorrow also depends on countless other conditions. Forcing denies this complexity. It insists that only your will matters. Non-forcing respects the web of causes. It acts with intention, but it allows space for life to weave its own design. In this space, peace arises. To live in harmony with karma is to see that destiny cannot be rushed, because destiny is not a single fixed event. It is the unfolding of countless causes, shaped by your actions and the actions of others, by conditions beyond your sight. Forcing breaks the flow because it narrows life into one outcome. Non-forcing opens you to infinite outcomes, each carrying its own lesson. When you embrace non-forcing, you begin to see delays not as failures, but as part of the unfolding. You begin to see obstacles not as punishments, but as teachers. You begin to see timing not as against you, but as guiding you. Karma is not in a hurry. It moves at the pace of truth, not of craving. If you align with it, your journey becomes lighter. If you rush, you will always stumble. The wisdom is clear. Act with sincerity, plant seeds of compassion, trust timing, release control. Forcing only creates friction, but non-forcing creates flow. In that flow, life unfolds with more grace than your ego could ever plan. And when you stop rushing destiny, you discover that what is meant for you does not need to be chased. It arrives when the heart is ready to receive. When you learn that forcing life breaks its natural rhythm, another truth quietly shows itself. Much of the pressure we feel to rush, to grasp, to control, comes from desire itself. Desire whispers that without its fulfillment, you are incomplete, that happiness waits just beyond the next achievement, relationship, or possession. Yet if you look closely, every desire, no matter how urgent, no matter how intoxicating, eventually fades. Longing never stays, it always dissolves. To see this clearly is to understand impermanence at the heart of craving, and to free yourself from the endless cycle of suffering it creates. Desire feels permanent when it is burning inside you. In the moment, it convinces you that satisfaction will last forever. You crave a promotion, a new car, a partner, recognition, or even spiritual attainment. You believe that once you achieve it, the longing will disappear and peace will remain. But experience shows otherwise. As soon as the object of desire is gained, the fire begins to cool, and new desires quickly take its place. What seemed so essential yesterday becomes ordinary today. The craving that felt permanent dissolves as naturally as smoke vanishing into the air. The Buddha taught that this cycle arising, burning, dissolving is the nature of all craving. The problem is not that we desire, but that we cling to desire as though it were unchanging. You suffer not because of the object itself, but because you forget impermanence. You mistake a passing wave for a permanent ocean. When you see through this illusion, craving loses much of its power over you. You still experience desires, but you no longer believe they can give lasting happiness. Longing is tied to the illusion of permanence. The mind believes that fulfillment will freeze joy in place. Yet nothing in life remains fixed. Relationships shift, possessions decay, status changes, health fluctuates. Even your own emotions move like weather, never staying for long. When you tie your happiness to desire, you tie it to things that will dissolve. And when they inevitably change, disappointment arises. The recognition of impermanence does not make life bleak. It makes life honest. It frees you from chasing shadows and invites you to savor what is here without grasping. There is also the hidden truth that desire itself is exhausting. Each longing carries weight. It occupies your mind, unsettles your body, drives you into restless action. Think of how much mental space is consumed by craving, how often thoughts circle around "if only" and "what if." When longing dissolves, you feel lighter, freer, as though a burden has lifted. The nature of desire is to appear heavy and urgent, but its essence is vapor. By seeing its impermanence, you stop letting it control you. Modern psychology confirms what the Buddha taught. Studies on hedonic adaptation show that humans quickly return to a baseline of happiness after achieving what they wanted. The joy of a new purchase fades within days or weeks. The excitement of success softens into normal routine. Even deep relationships change in feeling over time. This does not mean achievements and relationships have no value. It means their ability to sustain happiness is limited. The suffering arises when you expect them to provide what they cannot. Recognizing this keeps you from being enslaved by endless craving. Desire is not the enemy. What causes suffering is ignorance of its nature. You can allow desires to arise and dissolve without mistaking them for permanent truths. For example, hunger arises, you eat, and the desire fades. You do not cling to hunger or panic when it ends, but with deeper cravings, wealth, recognition, security, you often forget the same impermanence applies. When you learn to observe longing with the same calm awareness you give to hunger, you see it is just another passing condition. This awareness changes your relationship with time. Desire often projects into the future, pulling you away from the present. You chase a tomorrow that never truly arrives, because once you reach it, new desires have already appeared. When you see that longing dissolves by nature, you stop postponing happiness. You begin to value presence, because you know fulfillment in the future is fragile. This does not make you passive, it makes you wiser in where you place your energy. There is also a subtle beauty in the dissolving of desire. When one craving ends, space opens within you. That space is clarity. It allows stillness, creativity, and compassion to arise. If desire never dissolved, your mind would be perpetually crowded, leaving no room for depth. Impermanence clears the field, so new growth can happen. The problem is not that desires end, but that you resist their ending. You cling to the fire long after the flame is gone, and in that clinging lies suffering. This truth also reframes loss. Often, what you long for is not just gain, but the prevention of loss, keeping youth, keeping security, keeping loved ones close forever. But here too, impermanence rules. Longing for what cannot remain only deepens pain. To see impermanence clearly does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop fighting reality. You can love fully while it lasts, grieve honestly when it changes, and release without bitterness. The dissolving of desire teaches you to value each moment, not as a possession, but as a gift. Meditation reveals this with direct clarity. Sit quietly and watch the mind. Desires appear like waves, a thought of food, a memory of affection, a fantasy of success. Each feels real, urgent, necessary. Yet if you do not feed them, they pass on their own. Some dissolve quickly, others linger, but all eventually fade. This is impermanence in action. You begin to see that craving is not a permanent fire, but a flickering flame. Observing this reduces attachment, because you realize you are not bound to chase every longing. Spiritual practice deepens when you stop identifying with desire. Instead of saying, "I am my craving," you begin to say, "There is craving." This subtle shift breaks the chain of suffering. You no longer see desire as defining who you are, but as a temporary condition moving through you. When longing dissolves, you remain. This recognition is freedom. The nature of desire also teaches humility. Longings are often contradictory. At one moment, you crave solitude. At another, connection. At one moment, you want stability. At another, adventure. If you chase each with equal intensity, you are torn in pieces. Seeing that desires are impermanent helps you resist taking them too seriously. They are winds that blow through the mind, not eternal truths. Humility arises when you realize you do not need to obey every wind. This truth has profound implications for compassion. When you understand that your own cravings dissolve, you see that others are also caught in the same cycle. Their anger, greed, jealousy, or grasping are not fixed identities but temporary conditions. This insight softens judgment and increases patience. You know that just as your longing fades, so will theirs. You respond with kindness instead of harshness, because you see impermanence working in all beings. Non-attachment does not mean rejecting desire completely. It means walking with it wisely. You let longing arise, you see its nature, and you release it when it dissolves. In this way, desire becomes a teacher rather than a master. Each longing shows you impermanence in action. Each dissolution reminds you of freedom. If you cling, you suffer. If you observe, you learn. When you align with this truth, your life changes. You no longer chase endlessly after the next achievement or possession. You engage with the world, but without illusions. You enjoy what you have without demanding it last forever. You work toward goals, but without the desperation of needing them to define you. This balanced relationship with desire is what reduces suffering. It does not eliminate the natural arising of longing. It transforms your response to it. In the end, desire always dissolves, whether fulfilled or unfulfilled. This is its nature. To forget this is to suffer endlessly. To remember this is to taste freedom. The Buddha's teaching of impermanence is not abstract philosophy, it is daily reality. The more you see it, the less you cling. The less you cling, the lighter you walk. And with each longing that dissolves, a deeper peace takes root, a peace that no temporary desire can ever provide. When the truth of impermanence is deeply seen, a new question begins to surface. If desire always dissolves, then why do we keep clinging to what is already fading? The human heart often resists release, even when holding on brings pain. We grasp at relationships, memories, regrets, and expectations, as if our survival depended on them. Yet what we discover through the Dharma is that true healing often begins not in holding tighter, but in letting go. Release is not a loss, it is the space where life renews itself, where the body softens, the mind clears, and the spirit breathes freely again. Holding on feels safe in the moment because it gives the illusion of control. A broken relationship may leave wounds, but clinging to the pain feels like protecting yourself from forgetting. A past mistake may bring guilt, but replaying it again and again feels like proof that you care. Yet this form of holding does not protect it, prolongs the suffering. The wound cannot close because it is never allowed to breathe. When you let go, you do not erase the memory or deny the event. You simply release the need to carry it endlessly. This release is what allows healing to move in. Emotional wounds, like physical ones, need space to recover. If you keep scratching at a cut, it will never heal. In the same way, when you replay betrayals, failures, or grief, you prevent the natural restoration of the heart. Letting go is the act of stepping back, of trusting the natural wisdom of your being to mend. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises from attachment, and nowhere is this clearer than in the refusal to release. The longer you cling, the deeper the pain. The moment you release, the energy shifts. Healing is not forced, it unfolds because you stopped resisting. The body itself reflects this truth. Stress, anxiety, and tension build when the mind refuses to let go. Muscles tighten, breath shortens, sleep becomes restless. Holding on to anger or regret is not only a mental habit, it manifests physically. Countless studies show the link between unresolved emotional burdens and illness. When people learn to release, whether through forgiveness, meditation, or mindful acceptance, the body relaxes, blood pressure lowers, immune function improves, energy returns. The body thrives in letting go, because clinging is a constant fight against reality. Letting go does not mean you forget or dismiss what happened. It means you stop feeding it with resistance. A heartbreak remains part of your story, but it no longer dictates your present. A failure remains in memory, but it no longer defines your identity. Release transforms pain into wisdom. The experience remains, but the suffering softens. Healing arises because you are no longer chained to the wound. The act of holding often comes from fear. You fear that if you let go, you will lose meaning, love, or identity. You believe that your pain keeps you connected to what was lost, but fear binds you to the very thing you long to be free from. Letting go is not abandoning, meaning it is discovering a deeper meaning beyond possession. It is trusting that love does not vanish when you release the person, that wisdom does not vanish when you release the mistake, that strength does not vanish when you release the grief. Forgiveness is one of the clearest forms of release. To forgive is not to excuse or forget, but to stop carrying the poison of resentment. Holding on to anger is like holding a burning coal, hoping it will hurt the other, while only burning yourself. Letting go of resentment allows your heart to heal, even if justice or reconciliation never arrives. This healing is not a gift to the one who hurt you, it is a gift to yourself. Forgiveness is freedom, and freedom is the ground of healing. Letting go also creates space for new growth. When your hands are full of what no longer serves you, you cannot receive what life is offering now. Holding on blocks the flow of renewal. Release opens space. This is why people often discover that once they finally let go of an old attachment, new opportunities, connections, or insights arise. The space left by release is not emptiness, it is fertile ground. Healing thrives in this space because it is uncluttered, open, receptive. Meditation teaches release directly. As you sit, thoughts and emotions arise. When you cling, tension builds. When you push them away, struggle grows. But when you let them pass without attachment, the mind softens. This practice is not only mental, it is healing at every level. The nervous system settles, the heart feels lighter, clarity arises. Meditation is training in the art of release, showing again and again that letting go restores balance more effectively than holding on. The same truth applies to grief. Loss is painful, and healing does not mean pretending otherwise. Yet grief becomes unbearable when you cling to the idea that nothing should have changed. Holding on to what is gone freezes the heart in the past. Letting go honors the impermanence of life. It allows you to love what was while opening to what is. This does not diminish love, it deepens it, because you are no longer resisting reality. Healing grows not by denying the loss, but by releasing the demand for permanence. Even in daily frustrations, letting go heals. A harsh word from a colleague, a traffic delay, a mistake at work, all these can either linger in the mind or be released. When you hold on, irritation festers, affecting your mood and interactions. When you let go, peace returns quickly. Small releases train the heart for larger ones. Each act of letting go is practice in allowing healing instead of prolonging pain. Physical healing mirrors this principle. The body repairs itself when it is given rest, when inflammation is allowed to cool, when tension is released. Similarly, the mind heals when it stops clinging. Just as you cannot force a wound to close faster, you cannot force emotional pain to disappear by clutching it. Both body and mind thrive on spaciousness, trust, and patience. Healing is the natural state when obstruction is removed. Letting go also reveals a hidden strength, resilience. When you release, you learn that you are not defined by what you lost or what hurt you. You discover an inner capacity to move forward, to find meaning beyond circumstances. This resilience is not the denial of pain, but the wisdom of release. It shows you that healing is not the absence of scars, but the ability to live fully with them, unbound by their weight. Release is not passive. It is an active choice to stop fueling suffering. It takes courage, because clinging feels familiar. Yet every act of letting go is an act of trust. Trust that life continues, that the heart can mend, that healing is possible. In Buddhism, this trust is part of the path. The Dharma teaches that everything arises and passes away. When you align with this truth, you no longer fear release. You see it as part of the natural rhythm of existence. Letting go can be seen in nature. Trees release their leaves in autumn, not in despair but in preparation for renewal. Rivers release water to the sea, not in loss but in continuation. The body exhales with every breath, releasing the old to make space for the new. Life itself is a rhythm of release. When you resist this rhythm, suffering deepens. When you join it, healing flows. Ultimately, letting go heals faster than holding on because it removes the friction against reality. Holding is resistance, and resistance consumes energy. Release aligns you with what already is, conserving energy for growth. In that alignment, the body and mind repair themselves naturally. Healing is not something you must create, it is something you uncover once you stop clinging. When you fully embrace this truth, life changes. Old wounds lose their grip. Past regrets no longer weigh you down. Relationships feel lighter because you no longer demand permanence. Even pain becomes a teacher, showing you where release is needed. The heart becomes a place of renewal instead of a storage room for old burdens. The path of healing is not in endless analysis or constant holding. It is in the courage to release. Release the anger, the guilt, the regret, the craving. Release not by denial but by trust. In that release, healing arises faster than you believed possible, because healing was always waiting for space. And when you live this way, you discover that letting go is not a weakness but the deepest medicine, restoring both body and soul with every breath of freedom. When the heart discovers the medicine of release, another truth quietly appears from the silence it leaves behind. What we once clung to so desperately was never just about the thing itself, but about the emptiness it tried to fill. Desires are not random. They carry hidden messages. What you chase outside often reveals what is missing inside. This is why detachment is not simply a practice of letting go of cravings, but also a way of looking deeper, of seeing clearly what longing is trying to cover up. Beneath every pursuit lies a mirror, and in that mirror you can see your wounds, your fears, your forgotten parts of self. Every desire carries with it a story. The pursuit of wealth may not be about money itself, but about the hunger for security, the wish to never feel vulnerable again. The chase for recognition is not just about status, but about the craving to be seen, to be valued, to be enough. The longing for romance is not only about connection, but often about filling an inner loneliness that has been there for years. To see desire in this way is to understand that the object of the craving is secondary. What it points to within you is the true lesson. Without this insight, you chase endlessly, believing the object will complete you. With this insight, you begin to heal the root emptiness rather than feeding it with endless substitutions. Detachment gives you the distance to see this clearly. When you are entangled in craving, the story it tells feels absolute. If I only had this, then I would be whole. But detachment steps back and reveals another perspective. This desire is showing me where I still feel incomplete. Instead of blindly following the craving, you can learn from it. Each longing becomes a teacher. What you lack reveals itself through what you chase. The practice, then, is not to shame yourself for having desire, but to look at it honestly, as a mirror reflecting your inner state. This mirror of emptiness explains why fulfilled desires rarely bring lasting peace. If the underlying emptiness is not healed, even when you gain what you want, the hunger remains. It may quiet for a moment, but soon another craving arises to take its place. Without understanding, you spend your life decorating the surface of emptiness rather than tending to its depth. Detachment breaks this cycle because it reminds you that no external object can resolve an internal wound. Healing comes not from adding more, but from addressing the emptiness directly. The Buddha taught that craving arises from ignorance, from not seeing clearly. We believe that the world outside can fix what feels broken inside. But when you see through the illusion, craving becomes a doorway into deeper wisdom. Ask yourself, what is this longing trying to cover? What wound is it pointing toward? What fear is hidden beneath this chase? When you inquire in this way, desire transforms from a chain into a guide. It no longer controls you. It shows you where to look. This insight changes how you relate to yourself. Instead of condemning your desires as weaknesses, you approach them as signals. A desire for endless approval might point to a forgotten wound of neglect. A craving for constant busyness may point to a fear of facing emptiness in stillness. A need to control others might reveal insecurity within. Detachment gives you the space to look without judgment, to see these patterns not as flaws, but as invitations to heal. What makes this teaching profound is that emptiness is not a failure. In Buddhism, emptiness is also the truth of all things, that nothing has a fixed, independent essence. The emptiness revealed by desire is not a sign that you are broken, but a reminder of your impermanent, fluid nature. You chase because you forget this. You believe you are missing a permanent peace. But in reality, you are not missing what you feel, as emptiness is the absence of attachment, waiting to be filled not by objects, but by wisdom and compassion. The practice of turning desire into a mirror requires honesty. When a craving arises, instead of rushing to fulfill it, you pause and ask, "What is this showing me about myself?" For example, the longing for luxury may reveal a fear of insignificance. The hunger for endless knowledge may reveal insecurity about worth. The pursuit of beauty may reveal discomfort with vulnerability. Each desire opens a window into your hidden places. When you view them with detachment, you can meet those places with awareness rather than feeding them blindly. This perspective also brings compassion for others. When you see that your cravings reveal your emptiness, you recognize the same truth in others. The person chasing wealth may not be greedy, but deeply insecure. The one obsessed with attention may not be vain, but longing to be loved. The one clinging to possessions may not be selfish, but terrified of loss. Recognizing this softens judgment. Instead of resenting others for their desires, you see the suffering beneath. Compassion arises naturally because you understand that all beings are chasing what they think will heal them. Healing the emptiness revealed by desire requires patience and courage. It is easier to chase external objects than to face inner wounds. The craving distracts you, gives you temporary relief, and lets you avoid discomfort. But when you stop and turn inward, you encounter the raw emptiness itself. At first it feels painful, but within that emptiness is the seed of freedom. By sitting with it, by not running, you discover that it cannot destroy you. It softens, it opens, it reveals space where peace can grow. Meditation is the laboratory for this practice. As you watch the stream of thoughts, desires arise, cravings for comfort, for distraction, for recognition. Instead of indulging or rejecting them, you observe. With time, you begin to notice the deeper patterns. You see the fears behind the cravings, the insecurities behind the stories. This is how meditation transforms desire into a mirror. It slows the process enough for you to see clearly what is usually hidden beneath action. There is also a profound freedom in realizing that emptiness does not need to be filled. The mind believes that emptiness is a problem, a hole that must be covered. But emptiness, when seen without fear, is spaciousness. It is openness. It is the ground where peace rests. The chasing ends not because you have filled the emptiness, but because you see that nothing was missing. This is the highest form of detachment, to rest in emptiness without needing to escape it. This truth is reflected in daily life. Think of the times when you stopped chasing for a moment and allowed yourself simply to be walking quietly, sitting in silence, sharing presence without demand. In those moments, emptiness felt whole. No craving needed to be satisfied. This is not the emptiness of lack, but the emptiness of freedom. What you thought you lacked was only the illusion created by craving. By learning to use desire as a mirror, you turn suffering into a path of growth. Every craving becomes an invitation, not to rush outward, but to look inward. Each longing points to a place where compassion is needed. Each pursuit reflects where you still hold wounds. When you meet those wounds with awareness, they begin to heal. The chase loses its power because the inner lack is cared for. What once felt like emptiness now becomes clarity. When this way of seeing deepens, life feels lighter. You no longer exhaust yourself running after illusions. You no longer measure your worth by what you gain or lose. You no longer fear emptiness because you see it as the natural ground of being. The chasing slows, the heart softens, and you begin to live with more presence, more compassion, more truth. The mirror of emptiness is not a threat, it is a gift. It reveals where healing is needed and shows you the futility of chasing shadows. When you stop fearing what the mirror shows, you discover that emptiness is not a hole to be filled, but a space to be embraced. From that space arises wisdom, compassion, and peace. And once you learn this, desire no longer rules you. Instead, it becomes a teacher, guiding you back to the freedom that was always within. When you begin to see that desire is only a mirror for inner emptiness, the question naturally shifts toward action. If chasing creates suffering and clinging reveals wounds, how then should one live in the world? The answer does not lie in withdrawal or apathy, but in learning the art of effortless alignment. Taoist philosophy calls this Wu Wei, often translated as non-doing. It is not about inactivity, but about living in such deep harmony with the flow of life that actions arise naturally, without strain, without forcing, and without resistance. Within Buddhism, this principle resonates through detachment, patience, and the wisdom of the middle way. Wu Wei often confuses people because the words non-doing sound like laziness or indifference, but it is nothing of the sort. It is the opposite of struggle. It is the experience of being so attuned to reality that your choices are not made from craving, fear, or control, but from clarity and trust. It is when you act without resistance to what is, and in doing so, your actions carry a kind of ease that forced effort can never achieve. Buddhism echoes this through its teachings on right effort, effort that is balanced, wise, and free of attachment to results. When you live in alignment, life does not feel like a constant battle. You still act, work, and make choices, but they flow more naturally. There is no pushing against the current, no grasping at outcomes. This kind of action has a quiet power. It allows results to arise in their proper time without being distorted by impatience. Detachment in Buddhism creates the mental space for this state, because once you are free from clinging, you no longer act from desperation. Wu Wei is action without forcing, detachment in motion. In Taoism, the sage is compared to water. Water flows without resistance, finds its way around obstacles, and nourishes everything it touches without struggle. In Buddhism, this same principle is seen in patience and compassion. The Buddha taught that forcing against the truth of impermanence brings suffering, while acceptance allows peace. Wu Wei reflects this same wisdom. When you align with the natural rhythm, life carries you forward effortlessly. The strain disappears because the resistance has been released. In daily life, this principle shows itself clearly. Think of the times you pushed relentlessly for something, only to exhaust yourself with frustration. Contrast this with the times when you allowed things to unfold while staying attentive and responsive. The results often came more smoothly, with less struggle, and in ways you could not have predicted. This is Wu Wei in practice, acting when it is time, resting when it is not, and trusting the timing of life. Buddhism calls this patience, not as passive waiting but as wisdom that knows all things ripen when conditions are ready. Wu Wei is also about clarity of intention. When you act from craving, your choices are clouded, restless, and distorted. When you act from alignment, your mind is clear. You respond rather than react. In meditation, this can be felt directly. When you try to force the mind into silence, it resists. But when you sit with gentle awareness, silence comes naturally. The stillness arises not by control but by release. This is the art of effortless alignment. Silence is not forced but allowed. This principle also connects to compassion. When you act with force, even if your intention is good, your action carries strain. You may try to fix others, control outcomes, or impose your vision of what is right. But when compassion flows effortlessly, it does not demand or manipulate. It meets suffering with presence and responds with care that is natural, not calculated. This is why Buddhist detachment enhances compassion. Once you let go of clinging, your kindness no longer seeks reward. Wu Wei is compassion without agenda, pure responsiveness to the needs of the moment. One of the greatest difficulties in human life is the constant belief that we must control everything. Wu Wei dissolves this illusion. It reminds you that life is interconnected, that outcomes depend on countless causes beyond your control. When you stop forcing, you leave space for these conditions to align naturally. Buddhism teaches dependent origination, that everything arises due to conditions. Wu Wei is the practical expression of this, aligning with conditions rather than fighting them. This does not mean passivity. To live in Wu Wei is to be deeply engaged, but without the arrogance of control. The farmer plants seeds, waters the soil, tends the crops, but does not demand the harvest arrive tomorrow. The healer gives medicine, but trusts the body's own wisdom to recover. The teacher shares knowledge, but allows the student's readiness to shape their learning. This is effortless alignment, acting wisely, without clinging to immediate results. Buddhism describes this as skillful means, knowing how and when to act in harmony with causes and conditions. Wu Wei also reveals itself in creativity. Artists often describe moments when their work flows effortlessly, as though it is creating itself through them. Athletes speak of being in the zone, where movement happens without conscious struggle. These states are glimpses of effortless alignment. They arise not from control but from surrender to the moment. Buddhism supports this through mindfulness. Being fully present allows action to flow with ease, without distraction or resistance. The power of Wu Wei lies in its subtlety. Forced effort often leads to burnout, while effortless alignment is sustainable. It conserves energy because you are no longer fighting reality. You move with it, not against it. This is why patience is so important in Buddhism. It is the willingness to let things unfold in their own rhythm, knowing that rushing only creates tension. Wu Wei is patience in motion, the dance of stillness and action combined. Living this way also transforms relationships. Forcing others to meet your expectations creates conflict. Aligning with their nature allows harmony. This does not mean tolerating harm, but responding without the burden of control. You let people be who they are while acting wisely in response. Detachment prevents you from demanding, and Wu Wei allows your presence to bring peace rather than pressure. Relationships built on effortless alignment feel lighter, freer, more authentic. Another dimension of Wu Wei is trust. It asks you to trust the flow of life, to believe that what needs to unfold will unfold. This trust is not blind faith, but an understanding of impermanence and karma. You act skillfully, you plant good seeds, and then you release the outcome. Wu Wei is this release, the confidence that you do not need to pull at the stem to make it grow. Buddhism calls this trust in Dharma, the law of truth that carries life forward, whether or not you cling. The practice of Wu Wei also helps dissolve fear. Much of human anxiety arises from trying to control what cannot be controlled. When you accept the rhythm of life, fear lessens. You act when it is time, you rest when it is not, and you trust that what is yours cannot be lost. This calmness is not indifference, but deep alignment. Fear loses its grip because you are no longer fighting time, no longer demanding permanence. In meditation, the principle becomes even clearer. Breath flows naturally. If you try to force it, it becomes uneven and strained. When you let it be, it deepens on its own. Thoughts arise and fade. If you try to suppress them, they multiply. If you allow them, they dissolve. This is the art of non-doing in direct experience. Wu Wei is not about abandoning discipline, but about finding the discipline of ease, effort, that does not feel like struggle. Ultimately, effortless alignment is the natural state of being when attachment is released. Forcing comes from craving and ignorance. Non-doing arises from wisdom and trust. Buddhism and Taoism meet here. Both teach that peace comes not from conquest, but from harmony. Not from control, but from alignment. Wu Wei is the living expression of detachment. It is what happens when the mind no longer grasps, when the heart no longer fears, when action arises from stillness. When you live in this way, life feels lighter. Work does not exhaust you. Relationships carry less conflict. The mind settles into presence. Healing flows more naturally. Opportunities arise without strain. You begin to see that life was never meant to be wrestled into submission. It was meant to be met with clarity and trust. Effortless alignment is not something extraordinary. It is the natural state uncovered when craving ends. This is the quiet power of Wu Wei in the Buddhist context. Not the absence of action, but the presence of harmony. Not laziness, but wisdom. Not indifference, but patience. It is the art of letting life carry you without resistance, while still planting seeds of compassion and acting with care. It is the balance of effort and ease, the union of silence and motion, and once you learn to walk in this way, the struggle fades, leaving space for peace to flow through every step. When life begins to feel lighter through effortless alignment, another burden quietly reveals itself, the unseen weight of expectations. Unlike possessions, which can be put down or given away, expectations cling to the mind and press on the heart. They are invisible contracts we write with the world, with others, and with ourselves, often without realizing it. And yet they weigh more than any physical object, because they bind us to disappointment, frustration, and restlessness. If attachments tie us to things, expectations tie us to illusions, and those illusions block the natural unfolding of life. Expectations feel natural because they grow silently from desire. You expect others to treat you the way you treat them. You expect success to come after effort, love to follow kindness, happiness to arrive after sacrifice. These expectations sound reasonable, but the world does not operate by personal contracts. Life unfolds according to countless causes and conditions beyond your control. When expectation meets reality, conflict arises. The heavier the expectation, the deeper the wound when it is unmet. Unlike possessions, which you can release with practice, expectations live inside your assumptions. They bend perception and bind you to suffering without you even noticing. The Buddha spoke often of craving and clinging as the root of suffering, but within craving lies expectation. The moment you desire something, your mind begins to predict how it should arrive, when it should appear, and what it should look like. This prediction hardens into expectation. When life delivers something different, disappointment follows. What you suffer from is not always the event itself, but the gap between expectation and reality. A harsh word hurts less by itself than by how much it shatters the expectation of kindness. A delay in progress feels heavier, not because of the delay, but because it did not match the expectation of speed. This weight is heavier than attachments to possessions, because possessions are external. You can see them, you can feel them, you can choose to part with them. Expectations are internal and often unconscious. They shape how you see every moment. They dictate how you interpret experiences. They become the lens through which you judge yourself and others. To carry expectations is to carry an invisible cage wherever you go. The bars are not made of objects, but of assumptions about how life should be. One of the most subtle forms of expectation is self-expectation. You expect yourself to be stronger, wiser, more successful, less flawed. These inner demands drive constant dissatisfaction. Even when you achieve something, the mind immediately raises the bar. No achievement ever feels enough, because expectation shifts like the horizon. It recedes as you approach. This inner weight is exhausting, and it robs you of peace. Detachment teaches you to release possessions, but the deeper practice is to release expectations of yourself. Only then can you experience the freedom of simply being. Expectations of others are equally heavy. You expect your partner to love you in a certain way, your friends to understand without explanation, your children to fulfill your hopes, your colleagues to respect your efforts. Each expectation builds a silent condition for your happiness. When others fail to meet it, resentment grows. Yet often, they never agreed to these terms. They are living their own causes and conditions, just as you are. To demand that they match your script is to fight reality. Letting go of these expectations does not mean tolerating harm or neglect. It means releasing the burden of demanding that others fulfill roles they may never have chosen. In that release, relationships breathe. Expectations of life itself are the broadest and heaviest. You expect that good deeds will always be rewarded, that justice will always prevail, that the path will always be smooth. These are noble hopes, but when taken as guarantees, they create despair when life does not comply. The Dharma teaches impermanence and uncertainty as universal truths. To live as though life owes you guarantees is to deny these truths. Acceptance is not cynicism, it is the wisdom that sees life clearly. Without the burden of expectation, you can meet each moment as it is, not as you demand it to be. The greatest weight of expectation lies in its subtlety. You may think you are detached because you own little, live simply, and practice release. Yet if your mind is full of assumptions about how life should unfold, you are still bound. Attachments are visible chains, expectations are hidden ones. They block natural arrival because they do not allow you to see what life is actually offering. You overlook opportunities, blessings, and lessons because they do not match your imagined script. You wait for one door to open while ignoring the many already before you. This does not mean you should live without intention. Intention guides effort. Expectation clings to results. Intention says, I will act with kindness. Expectation says, others will treat me kindly in return. Intention is within your control. Expectation depends on forces beyond you. The key to freedom is to keep intention alive while releasing expectation. You walk the path with sincerity, but without demanding a specific outcome. This balance allows life to flow naturally. Meditation reveals the nature of expectation clearly. As you sit, thoughts arise not only of craving but of how things should be. The mind should be still by now. My practice should be deeper. I should feel peace. These expectations create frustration, but when you release them, you notice that presence itself is enough. Peace does not come from fulfilling the expectation of silence. It comes from dropping the expectation altogether. This lesson in meditation extends to all of life. Freedom lies not in perfecting the moment, but in releasing the demand that it be perfect. Expectations are also heavy because they multiply suffering. Pain in itself is sharp but simple. Expectation adds layers. This should not have happened. I deserved better. Things must be different. These thoughts add weight to the raw experience. Letting go of expectation lightens pain. Suffering reduces to its natural size. The sting of disappointment softens when you stop demanding that life meet your script. You learn to meet reality directly, without the extra weight of should. The release of expectation also deepens gratitude. When you expect nothing, everything becomes a gift. The smallest kindness feels precious. The simplest moment feels full. Gratitude blossoms not because life gives more, but because the mind stops demanding more. The heart sees clearly what is already here. This clarity is the opposite of entitlement. It allows joy to arise from the ordinary because the ordinary is no longer measured against impossible standards. This principle extends to spiritual practice itself. Many seekers become trapped by expectations of progress, expectations of enlightenment, of constant peace, of endless joy. When these do not arrive as imagined, doubt and discouragement grow. But the Dharma unfolds in its own rhythm. Progress cannot be forced, and wisdom does not always appear in the form you expect. Releasing these hidden expectations allows the path to open naturally. You learn to value presence over progress, sincerity over milestones. In doing so, growth unfolds more authentically. Letting go of expectation is not abandonment of hope or effort. It is the cultivation of humility before reality. You act with clarity, you live with compassion, but you do not bind yourself with demands about how life must respond. This humility frees you from bitterness when things do not go your way. It also frees you from arrogance when they do. Life becomes less about controlling outcomes and more about participating fully in the unfolding. The weight of expectation also affects how we see the future. Constant expectation pulls you out of the present and ties you to a horizon that never arrives. You wait for happiness tomorrow, for fulfillment later, for life to begin when conditions are met. But tomorrow is always beyond reach. The present is the only place life can be lived. Releasing expectation anchors you here, where peace is possible. When you begin to loosen the grip of expectation, you may feel lighter immediately, as though a load you did not know you carried has been lifted. This is because expectations operate silently in the background, shaping perception without your awareness. Releasing them is like removing a weight from your shoulders that you thought was part of your body. Suddenly, the mind has space, the heart has ease. Life feels less like a burden and more like a gift. This practice is lifelong. Expectations will arise because the mind is conditioned to predict and assume. But with awareness, you can meet them gently. You can notice, this is expectation, not reality. And in that noticing, the weight begins to dissolve. Each release creates more freedom, more peace, more space for life to arrive naturally. The hidden weight of expectation is heavier than possessions because it cannot be put down by will alone. It must be seen clearly, understood deeply, and released with practice. But once released, the freedom is profound. You discover that life flows more gently without constant demands, that joy is brighter without constant conditions, and that peace is nearer when you stop waiting for it to come in the form you expect. In this way, releasing expectation is not loss, but liberation, the opening of the heart to reality as it is, unbound and free. When the hidden burden of expectations begins to dissolve, what naturally takes its place is a new quality of being patience. Without the constant pull of things must happen now, the heart has space to rest in trust. But patience in the Buddhist path is far more than waiting quietly for time to pass. It is an active strength, a conscious trust in the unfolding of Dharma, and a deliberate choice not to be shaken by delay, discomfort, or hardship. Patience is not passivity. It is power that arises from understanding reality as it truly is. The Sanskrit word khanti, often translated as patience, is one of the 6 perfections practiced by bodhisattvas. It carries meanings that go deeper than the modern sense of endurance. It speaks of forbearance, tolerance, resilience, and a radical willingness to meet the world as it arrives without collapsing into anger or despair. It is not about gritting teeth until something changes. It is about opening fully to what is, with the steady confidence that life unfolds according to causes and conditions, not according to craving. Patience is difficult because the mind resists reality. It wants things to move at its own pace, in its own way. When that does not happen, agitation rises. This is why patience is called a perfection, because to truly practice it is to transcend the ordinary reactions of the mind. In anger, you believe life is unfair. In impatience, you believe you are entitled to a different moment than the one in front of you. Patience dismantles these illusions by showing you that things take the time they need. To meet them with trust instead of resentment is to live in harmony with truth. Patience is not weakness. It is not surrender to oppression or indifference to injustice. It is strength precisely because it gives you clarity in the midst of difficulty. Anger clouds judgment, and fear narrows vision, but patience holds steady, allowing you to respond wisely. When faced with insult, patience keeps you from striking back in a way that multiplies suffering. When faced with hardship, patience keeps you from abandoning the path in despair. This is why kshanti is considered essential to liberation. Without it, every obstacle would send you spiraling into reaction. In relationships, patience is the difference between peace and conflict. The expectation that others should always meet your needs, change quickly, or understand perfectly creates endless friction. Patience recognizes that people grow at their own pace, shaped by their own conditions. It allows you to support without forcing, to love without demanding. This patience does not mean tolerating harm or abuse. It means responding from wisdom rather than from reactive anger. In its highest form, it allows you to meet even hostility with compassion, seeing that those who cause harm are themselves caught in suffering. Patience also transforms how you relate to time. Much suffering comes from rushing life, from demanding that growth, healing, or success arrive on your schedule. But growth has its rhythm. Seeds sprout when conditions are ready, not when you demand. The same is true of spiritual progress. Enlightenment is not a prize you can seize by effort alone. It is the unfolding of understanding when the mind has been cultivated properly. Patience allows you to keep practicing with sincerity without demanding results. This steady devotion is more powerful than restless striving. The Buddha himself emphasized patience as the greatest ascetic practice. While others sought liberation through extreme deprivation, he saw that the ability to remain steady in the face of pain, insult, and delay was the true test of strength. To sit calmly when insulted, to endure hardship without hatred, to walk steadily when the path is long, this is the perfection of kshanti. It is easy to appear strong in moments of triumph, but patience is the quiet strength that sustains you through every season, not just the favorable ones. Patience is also an expression of wisdom. To be patient is to recognize that all things are impermanent. Anger flares, then fades. Suffering rises, then passes. The storm never lasts forever. Knowing this, you can meet difficulty without despair, because you trust its transient nature. You no longer fight to escape every discomfort immediately. You rest in the knowledge that time itself carries change. This trust turns what feels unbearable into something manageable. It does not eliminate pain, but it prevents pain from turning into suffering. In meditation, patience is the foundation. The restless mind wants stillness instantly. The practitioner expects calm in minutes. When this does not arrive, frustration grows. But the practice itself is patience, returning again and again to the breath, the moment, the awareness, without judgment. Progress unfolds slowly, often invisibly, like water wearing away stone. Without patience, meditation collapses into struggle. With patience, the mind opens like a flower in its own time. Patience is also required for forgiveness. To release anger toward those who hurt you is not an overnight act. The wound may be deep, the trust broken. Forgiveness cannot be forced, but it can be nurtured with patience. Each time anger arises, you meet it without feeding it. Each time resentment returns, you observe it without judgment. Over time, the grip loosens. Patience allows wounds to heal at the pace they need, without rushing, without clinging. In this way, patience is compassion applied inward as much as outward. Spiritual patience is not about sitting still while waiting for life to improve. It is about active trust, trust that your efforts matter, that wisdom ripens slowly, that even setbacks are part of the path. It is the courage to continue planting seeds, even when you cannot see the harvest. It is the humility to accept that you are not in charge of timing. This humility softens the ego, because impatience is always ego demanding its way. Patience surrenders the ego's timetable and bows to the rhythm of Dharma. There is also patience with yourself. Too often, the hardest expectations are directed inward. You want to be calm immediately, wise immediately, free of flaws immediately. But human growth is uneven, marked by progress and regression. Patience with yourself is the willingness to keep walking without condemnation, to meet your own imperfections with understanding. This patience prevents the spiral of guilt and self-criticism that blocks growth. It allows you to see yourself as a work in progress, worthy of compassion at every stage. Patience also expands perspective. When you are impatient, the mind narrows to the immediate discomfort. Patience widens vision, reminding you of the bigger picture. You see that difficulties are temporary, that growth requires time, that truth is not revealed all at once. This broader vision brings peace because it reduces the urgency of every moment. You no longer demand instant resolution. You see the value of process. The perfection of patience is not easy. It requires practice in small things as well as large. Each moment of irritation is an opportunity to cultivate it. Waiting in line, facing delays, enduring criticism, all become practice grounds. Instead of reacting with anger, you can breathe, observe, and let the feeling pass. Each act of patience strengthens the mind. Over time, it becomes natural. What once agitated you deeply no longer disturbs you. This is not repression, it is mastery. In society, patience is often undervalued. Speed, productivity, and immediate results are glorified. But spiritual patience offers a deeper success. It builds resilience, peace, and clarity. It allows communities to resolve conflict without escalating violence, to endure hardship without despair, to pursue justice without hatred. A world with more patience is a world with less suffering. Ultimately, spiritual patience is the expression of trust in Dharma. It is the recognition that life unfolds according to truth, not according to personal demand. It is the strength to walk the path steadily, without rushing, without forcing, without despair. It is the gentle but unshakable power that allows the heart to remain open, even in the face of difficulty. To cultivate this perfection is to discover that patience is not waiting for life. It is living fully within it, with trust, with steadiness, and with peace. When the mind learns patience and begins to trust the slow unfolding of the Dharma, another trap reveals itself, one that pulls us away from both patience and presence, the endless grip of what if. These two words are deceptively small, but they carry immense weight. They drag the heart into alternate realities where you replay the past or imagine futures that never come. They create whole worlds of illusion that feel real but exist only in thought. The freedom you long for cannot be found in these phantom landscapes. It can only be discovered here, in the immediacy of this moment, where life is actually lived. The mind drifts easily into what if. You replay mistakes and say, what if I had chosen differently? You rehearse lost opportunities and whisper, what if I had tried harder? You cling to regret and build alternate versions of your life where everything turned out better. Or you project into the future, worrying, what if I fail? What if I lose? What if things go wrong? Each of these thoughts creates a parallel reality, but none of them exist. They bind you to illusions while robbing you of the only reality that does exist, the present. The Buddha described this as part of the wandering nature of the mind. Instead of resting in awareness, the mind travels to past and future, constructing narratives that fuel craving and suffering. When you are caught in what if, you are never free. Regret ties you to what cannot be changed. Fear ties you to what has not yet arrived, and both prevent you from experiencing the peace available right now. Freedom arises when you see these alternate realities for what they are, shadows, not truth, and return to presence. Regret is one of the most painful forms of what if. It convinces you that happiness was lost forever because of a wrong choice or missed chance. Yet regret is based on the illusion that life could have unfolded differently than it did. In reality, each moment arises from countless causes and conditions far beyond your control. To believe it could have been otherwise is to deny the law of dependent origination. Life could not have unfolded any other way because it was the precise outcome of everything that came before. Seeing this does not remove responsibility for your actions, but it releases the false belief that clinging to regret can change the past. Regret dissolves when you understand that the only meaningful choice is the one you make now. Fear is another face of what if. It projects disasters that may never occur, chaining you to anxieties about the future. Fearful what-ifs drain your energy, keeping you from acting with clarity in the present. They magnify uncertainty into catastrophe, yet the future is as empty of fixed reality as the past. It is not yet born. To live in constant fear of what might happen is to live in a dream of suffering. The practice of mindfulness cuts through this illusion. When you anchor yourself in breath, in body, in awareness, you see that the feared outcome is not here. The present is always manageable. It is only the imagined future that feels unbearable. The prison of what if is strengthened by comparison. You look at others and think, what if my life were like theirs? You measure your path against their success, beauty, or happiness, and create alternate stories where you are different. But comparison is based on fragments, not truth. You see only parts of another's life and project your own story onto it. The reality you construct is not real, it is a reflection of longing. When you recognize this, you free yourself from envy. You stop measuring your worth against illusions and return to the reality of your own path. The Buddha taught that clinging to thoughts of past and future is a form of suffering because it denies impermanence. The past is gone, dissolved like a dream upon waking. The future is unborn, uncertain, beyond grasp. Only the present breath, the present step, the present awareness is real. To free yourself from what if is to awaken from the dream of illusion and live where life is truly happening. This does not mean ignoring past lessons or refusing to plan for the future. It means learning from the past without being chained to it and preparing for the future without being consumed by it. Healing from what if requires courage because the mind is addicted to its stories. It takes effort to see them as stories rather than truths. Each time regret or fear arises, the practice is to pause and ask, is this real now, or is it only thought? By naming it, you weaken its grip. By returning to the present, you reclaim your freedom. Over time, the mind learns to rest more often in awareness, less often in illusion. Compassion plays a role here as well. Much of the suffering from what if arises from harshness toward yourself. What if I had been better, smarter, stronger? Compassion answers, you did what you could with the understanding you had. Life unfolded as it did. The lesson now is to forgive yourself, to hold the past with gentleness rather than punishment. Compassion allows you to release the chains of regret and use your energy for growth instead of self-condemnation. Letting go of what if also deepens relationships. Many conflicts persist because people replay the past. What if you had treated me differently? What if I had spoken differently? These rehearsals prevent true reconciliation. By releasing alternate versions of the past, you open to the reality of the present connection. You meet the person before you as they are now, not as they were in your imagined stories. This openness creates space for healing and understanding. Meditation is a direct path to freedom from what if. When you sit, the mind will wander to alternate realities. Instead of fighting, you observe, there is regret, there is fear. You return to the breath, to the body, to presence. Slowly, you train the mind to distinguish between reality and illusion. Over time, the wandering lessens. The mind tastes the peace of resting in what is. Each moment of presence is liberation from countless what-ifs. Life becomes lighter when you stop carrying these alternate realities. You no longer replay endless scenes of the past. You no longer rehearse disasters of the future. You live with clarity, responding to each moment as it comes. Energy once trapped in illusion becomes available for creativity, kindness, and joy. The freedom beyond what if is not a distant goal. It is the simplicity of being here, unchained by shadows. Ultimately, the Dharma shows that what if is only another form of craving. It craves a different past, a different future, a different self. But craving is always unsatisfied because it clings to what cannot be. Detachment dissolves this craving by showing that life is enough as it is, imperfect, impermanent, but real. When you release what if, you do not lose possibility, you gain freedom. You step out of the endless maze of alternate realities and into the living truth of this moment. This freedom is the essence of awakening. It is not found in correcting the past or securing the future, but in letting go of illusions altogether. When the chain of what if falls away, you discover that you were never lacking, never incomplete. You were only distracted by shadows. In presence, there is peace, clarity, and liberation. And in that freedom, the heart rests in the only place it was ever meant to be here. When the mind learns to step beyond the illusions of what if, it begins to see another mystery of life more clearly, the paradox of release. So often, the things you cling to most tightly slip further away, while the things you surrender return in ways you could not have planned. Letting go does not mean abandoning care or losing value. It means allowing space for natural return. The paradox is that release carries its own gravity. When you stop grasping, what is meant for you often circles back, lighter, freer, transformed. Clinging pushes things away because it suffocates. When you hold a person, an opportunity, or even an idea too tightly, the energy becomes heavy, filled with fear and desperation. That energy creates resistance. People feel it as pressure, situations feel it as force, and life itself seems to respond by keeping distance. Release shifts the energy. Instead of clutching, you open your hand. This openness does not repel, it invites. It creates a field where what belongs to you can return without being forced. This is why letting go attracts. It is not about magical thinking, but about alignment with truth. When you let go, you stop acting from fear of loss. You stop projecting desperation into every interaction. You no longer distort reality with constant demand. In that stillness, others feel safe around you. Opportunities flow more easily toward you. Life responds because you are no longer pushing. The very act of non-grasping creates a kind of natural magnetism. Relationships offer the clearest example. When love is clung to, it becomes burdened with control, expectation, and fear. The more you try to hold someone, the more they feel trapped. Release allows love to breathe. When you love freely, without chains, people feel respected and valued. Paradoxically, this freedom often deepens the bond. Some who leave even return, not because you chased them, but because your openness created space for them to rediscover their own choice. What comes back through release is not forced affection, but genuine connection. This principle applies beyond relationships. Think of opportunities. When you chase endlessly after a certain outcome, you may force decisions, push doors, and exhaust yourself, often with little success. But when you let go, acting with sincerity but without desperate attachment, you create space for unexpected possibilities. Sometimes, the very opportunity you thought was lost reappears, reshaped in a way that fits better than before. Letting go does not kill possibility. It clears the path for alignment. The Buddha taught that craving creates suffering, but he also taught that non-attachment brings freedom. What is often missed is that this freedom does not repel life's goodness, it draws it more deeply. Non-attachment is not indifference, it is the ability to hold life with open hands. When the mind no longer chases, it no longer distorts reality. Life then meets you in its natural rhythm. What is meant for you can arrive without obstruction. Psychology mirrors this truth. In attachment theory, anxious clinging creates instability in relationships, while secure detachment fosters closeness. In energy psychology, desperation is experienced as repelling, while calm presence feels safe and attractive. Letting go shifts your energy from fear to trust. Others sense this shift, even if unconsciously. Life itself reflects it, because your actions are no longer driven by panic, but by clarity. Letting go is not giving up effort. You still plant seeds, take steps, and live fully, but you release the demand that results arrive exactly as you imagine. This surrender opens doors you could not have forced. Many people discover that once they stop obsessing over a goal, progress happens naturally. The job call arrives after they release worry. The creative idea flows when they stop forcing. The healing begins when they stop demanding instant recovery. Release clears the block. There is also a deeper wisdom in this paradox. Often what you cling to is not ready for you, or you are not ready for it. Clinging tries to force timing. Release allows both sides to grow. When things return after letting go, they often return transformed. The relationship that once suffocated becomes healthier. The opportunity that once seemed lost appears in a better form. The dream that once felt impossible arises with clearer direction. What returns through release is not the same as what you let go. It is refined by time and alignment. This principle connects to karma. Forcing interferes with the natural unfolding of cause and effect. Release allows karma to ripen at its own pace. When you let go, you trust that if conditions are right, what is meant will return. If it does not return, you understand it was never yours to hold. Either way, peace is found. The paradox is that release increases the chance of return because it aligns with the natural law instead of fighting against it. The practice of letting go also transforms your inner state. Clinging keeps you restless, constantly measuring, fearing, controlling. Release brings calm, which itself is attractive. Calmness draws people and situations because it feels like safety in a chaotic world. Your energy shifts from contraction to openness, and openness always invites more than grasping. In meditation, this is clear. When you cling to silence, the mind becomes noisy. When you let go and simply observe, silence arises naturally. When you chase peace, agitation grows. When you release, peace comes on its own. This mirrors life itself. What you force resists. What you release finds its way back in its own time. Letting go also reveals what truly belongs to you. Not everything you release will return, and that is part of the wisdom. Some things fall away because they were never aligned with your path. When you cling, you cannot see this clearly. When you release, you allow the test of reality. What stays away was never yours, and what returns is meant. In this way, release not only attracts but also clarifies. It shows you the difference between attachment and genuine alignment. The paradox of attraction through release does not mean waiting passively. It means living actively, fully, and sincerely, while not binding your heart with fear. You continue to love, to create, to work, but you stop gripping the outcome. You let life move in its rhythm. You discover that release is not emptiness, it is trust. And in that trust, life often brings back more than you expected. This truth also deepens gratitude. When something returns after being released, it feels like a gift rather than an entitlement. You no longer take it for granted. You value it more deeply because you know it could have remained gone. Release turns return into blessing. Clinging turns return into obligation. This shift transforms how you hold the people and opportunities in your life. Ultimately, the paradox of letting go is not about manipulating outcomes, but about aligning with reality. You cannot control return, but you can free yourself from suffering. And in freeing yourself, you create the openness through which return becomes possible. Letting go attracts not by force, but by resonance. What resonates with your true path comes back, not as a possession, but as a natural part of your unfolding. The wisdom is simple but profound. Release does not mean loss. It means trust. And in that trust, life has space to bring back what is truly yours, not through grasping, but through alignment. What you let go of may return transformed, or it may not return at all. Either way, you are free, and that freedom itself is the greatest gift, because in freedom, everything you need arrives when it is meant to. When you begin to understand that letting go allows what is meant for you to return naturally, another truth rises quietly from this wisdom, the truth of timing. So much suffering comes not only from clinging but from believing life is running ahead of you or passing you by. The fear of being too late, the pressure of being too early, the panic of missing your chance, these anxieties weigh more heavily than the actual events. Yet the Dharma teaches that timing is never wrong. Nothing that belongs to your path arrives too late, and nothing that is not meant to stay can be forced to come early. The Buddhist view on timing dissolves the myth of missed opportunities and replaces it with trust in the unfolding of conditions. The Pali phrase kalena dhammasaka cha refers to discussing or practicing the Dharma at the right time. Its meaning goes far beyond conversation. It reflects the understanding that life unfolds in rhythms. To act out of alignment with those rhythms creates struggle, but to act in harmony with them brings peace. Timing in Buddhism is not about luck or chance. It is about the ripening of conditions. When causes and conditions align, results appear. When they do not, forcing only creates suffering. This perspective dissolves anxiety because it reminds you that what has not arrived is not late. It is simply unripe. The obsession with being early or late is rooted in comparison. You look at the lives of others and believe you are behind, or you believe you have wasted time. But each being walks a unique path shaped by karma, conditions, and choices. To measure your timing against another's is to miss the truth of your own unfolding. A flower does not bloom too late because another blossomed earlier. Each opens in its season. The Dharma teaches the same about your life. When you see this clearly, you stop racing against illusions of time. Nothing is ever wasted, even when it feels delayed. A goal you did not reach when you wanted may not have been failure, but preparation. A relationship that ended before you felt ready may not have been loss, but a clearing for growth. A dream postponed may not have been denial, but alignment with conditions you could not yet see. The Buddhist view on timing is that every step belongs, even the ones that feel like detours. What looks late or early is simply part of the pattern of causes unfolding beyond your limited sight. Anxiety about missed opportunities dissolves when you recognize impermanence. Every opportunity is transient, but life continuously offers new ones. To cling to the idea of a single chance lost forever is to misunderstand the abundance of Dharma. The universe does not offer one door, it offers countless doors, each leading to different lessons. When one closes, another opens, not because fate is compensating you, but because impermanence itself ensures constant change. Nothing is too late, because new conditions always arise. Right timing also requires patience. The mind, driven by craving, demands instant results, but reality ripens slowly. The Buddha compared this to planting seeds. No matter how much you water, the sprout emerges only when it is ready. To declare it late is to misunderstand the process. The same is true of your own growth. Wisdom ripens slowly, healing unfolds gradually, understanding deepens in its own rhythm. To accept this is to embrace the peace of patience. This principle transforms how you see setbacks. What feels like delay may be protection. What feels like missed opportunity may be alignment with something greater. The Dharma does not teach blind optimism, but clarity of cause and effect. When things do not arrive, it is not punishment. It is the reality of conditions not yet ready. This view softens despair, because you no longer interpret every delay as personal failure. You see it as the rhythm of life, guiding you to what is truly meant. Even age becomes lighter when viewed through this lens. The fear of being too old or too young dissolves when you recognize that timing is not measured by social expectations, but by readiness of mind and heart. Some awaken in youth, others in old age, and both are complete. The Dharma is available at every stage. Enlightenment does not expire, and wisdom does not have a deadline. To believe you are late in life is to impose a false timeline. In truth, every moment is equally valid as a point of awakening. Right timing also applies to speech and action. The Buddha taught that words spoken at the wrong time can wound, while the same words at the right time can heal. Actions taken prematurely may collapse, while actions taken in harmony with conditions succeed. To live with awareness of timing is to develop sensitivity to the flow of life. You learn to sense when it is time to act, when it is time to wait, when it is time to release. This sensitivity is not superstition. It is mindfulness attuned to conditions. Meditation teaches timing on a small scale. When you sit, impatience may arise. I should be calm by now. But calm comes when it is ready. Insight arises in its own rhythm, not by force. Each breath is a lesson in timing. Inhale when the body calls, exhale when it releases. You cannot rush the breath. You cannot delay it forever. The body knows its rhythm. Trusting it is practice in trusting life. Freedom arises when you no longer see your path as too late or too early. You see that everything has unfolded exactly as it could, given the conditions. This does not mean you are powerless. It means your power lies in action now, not in lamenting the past or fearing the future. You can plant seeds, cultivate causes, and trust that results will ripen when the time is right. This trust is not passive, it is active wisdom. It frees you from anxiety because you no longer demand that life match your timetable. The paradox is that when you release the anxiety of timing, you often find yourself more aligned with it. Without desperation, you notice opportunities you once overlooked. Without the pressure of too late, you step into moments you would have resisted. Without the arrogance of too early, you prepare with patience until the time is ripe. Letting go of the illusion of wrong timing actually makes you more present for the right timing. In this way, the Buddhist view of timing is not about waiting for destiny, but about dissolving the illusion that destiny can be late. The Dharma teaches that all things arise when causes meet conditions. Nothing arrives before its time, and nothing that has passed was ever meant to stay longer than it did. To live with this understanding is to live with ease. Anxiety fades because you no longer measure your life against false clocks. You rest in the rhythm of truth, where every moment is exactly where it belongs. When the truth of right timing begins to settle in the heart, another layer of wisdom becomes clear. Much of the suffering we create comes not from the events themselves, but from our constant attempts to force life into shapes it was never meant to take. The anxiety of too late or too early often leads to pushing, grasping, demanding outcomes before they are ready. Yet, this very act of forcing creates a subtle form of violence. It is not the violence of fists or weapons, but the quiet self-harm of resisting reality, the friction that arises when willpower tries to dominate the flow of causes and conditions. This friction drains energy, clouds judgment, and erodes inner peace. The violence of forcing is subtle because it hides beneath determination, ambition, and even what appears as discipline. You tell yourself you are being strong, that you are shaping your destiny, but beneath the surface, the body tightens, the breath shortens, the heart hardens. The willpower that forces is not aligned with wisdom, but with craving. It demands results now, regardless of readiness. It refuses to listen to the natural rhythm of life. And each time it does this, it creates small wounds inside, wounds of exhaustion, disappointment, and quiet despair. In Buddhism, this is the distinction between right effort and wrong effort. Right effort is aligned with Dharma. It is steady, balanced, purposeful, and sustainable. Wrong effort is forcing, born of craving and ignorance. It seeks to bend reality instead of harmonizing with it. Wrong effort may produce short-term results, but at the cost of long-term well-being. The subtle violence is not only against yourself but also against others, because forcing outcomes often means pressuring people, manipulating situations, and ignoring natural boundaries. Consider how this appears in relationships. When you try to force someone to stay, to love you in a certain way, or to meet your expectations, you may succeed temporarily through pressure or persuasion. But the result carries friction. The connection loses authenticity, the energy becomes strained, and both hearts suffer. Forcing may create compliance, but it cannot create genuine love. The subtle violence lies in denying the other person their freedom, and in denying yourself the peace of acceptance. In personal growth, forcing shows up as impatience with yourself. You demand instant transformation, immediate wisdom, flawless discipline. You push through fatigue, ignore emotions, and berate yourself when progress feels slow. This harshness may appear as dedication, but it is a form of self-violence. The path of Dharma is not quick or linear. Forcing your growth misunderstands its nature. True transformation unfolds through patient practice, not through violence against your own humanity. The body bears the weight of forcing. Stress accumulates in muscles, sleep is disturbed, and illness arises when the mind demands more than the body can provide. Countless people exhaust themselves with forced productivity, believing their worth is measured by output. The violence here is subtle but real. The nervous system is constantly overcharged, and the body pays the price. Letting go of forcing does not mean laziness. It means working with balance, honoring limits, and trusting that effort aligned with wisdom is more powerful than frantic pushing. Forcing outcomes also creates friction with reality itself. The Dharma teaches that everything arises from conditions. When conditions are not yet ripe, forcing does not accelerate growth, it distorts it. It is like trying to pull open a flower before it has bloomed. You may tear the petals in your haste. The same happens in life. By pushing for results prematurely, you damage the natural unfolding. The violence here is against truth itself, as though your will could overpower impermanence and interdependence. This friction extends to the mind. Forcing creates constant conflict between expectation and reality. The more you push, the more reality resists. The result is agitation, anger, and despair. Instead of flowing with life, you are at war with it. This war is exhausting, because reality always wins. The subtle violence lies in refusing to accept this, in bruising your own heart against the unyielding walls of truth. Even spiritual practice can become distorted by forcing. Many practitioners, eager for enlightenment, push themselves with extreme discipline, expecting visions, peace, or powers. They measure their progress constantly and become frustrated when results do not appear. This forcing blocks the very insight they seek. The mind that grasps cannot see clearly. The subtle violence here is against the spirit itself, because the path is meant to bring liberation, not more chains of craving. True practice is steady, sincere, and free of force. The irony is that forcing often delays what you want. When you push, you create resistance. When you grasp, you narrow your vision. The opportunity may be near, but you miss it because you are fixated on controlling it. When you release forcing, clarity returns. You see options you overlooked, and results often arrive more smoothly. The paradox is that non-forcing often achieves more than forcing, because it moves in alignment with conditions rather than against them. The Buddha himself modeled this wisdom. Before enlightenment, he practiced extreme asceticism, forcing his body into weakness and near death. He believed that by denying every need, he could conquer craving. But he realized that this forcing was another form of violence, another extreme. he abandoned it and embraced the middle way, where effort is balanced, sustainable, and compassionate. Enlightenment came not through force but through alignment. His life is the clearest testimony that forcing outcomes leads to suffering, while harmony leads to liberation. The subtle violence of forcing is also emotional. When you demand that life be different, you deny yourself the compassion of presence. You reject your current state, saying it is not enough. This rejection creates inner conflict, a division within. Instead of nurturing yourself, you push yourself away. Over time, this creates loneliness even within your own heart. Letting go of forcing means embracing yourself as you are, while still walking the path of growth. It is self-kindness, not self-rejection, that heals. Socially, forcing creates harm on larger scales. Leaders who force agendas without alignment with conditions cause conflict and division. Societies that force productivity at the expense of human well-being create burnout and inequality. Even well-meaning reforms, when forced without patience for natural adaptation, create backlash. The Dharma's wisdom of timing and non-forcing applies not only to individuals but to communities. Forcing creates resistance at every level. Alignment creates harmony. To release forcing is not to abandon effort. It is to replace struggle with skillfulness. It is to act with clarity, to move when the time is right, and to trust the process when it is not. This requires humility, because the ego thrives on control. To stop forcing is to admit that you are not the master of all conditions. It is to bow to the larger rhythm of life, to accept that your will alone cannot bend reality. This humility is not weakness, it is wisdom. Meditation again shows this truth clearly. When you force the mind to be silent, it rebels. When you allow thoughts to arise and pass, silence comes naturally. When you force breath to follow your command, it becomes uneven. When you simply observe, it deepens on its own. This is the daily lesson. Force creates friction. Release creates peace. The path forward is not about eliminating effort, but about transforming it. Right effort is gentle but steady, powerful without being harsh, resilient without being violent. It is effort born of love for truth, not fear of failure. This effort does not wound, it nourishes. It does not exhaust, it sustains. When you live with this kind of effort, you discover that progress is smoother, relationships are freer, and the heart is lighter. The subtle violence of forcing outcomes dissolves when you embrace trust. Trust that life unfolds in its rhythm. Trust that your sincere actions are enough. Trust that what is meant will arrive without your desperate pushing. This trust softens the heart, relaxes the body, and clears the mind. It allows you to walk the path with peace rather than tension. In the end, forcing is violence because it denies truth. Release is healing because it accepts truth. To let go of forcing is to stop harming yourself, to stop fighting the Dharma, and to begin living in harmony with it. And in that harmony, you discover that peace was never about bending life to your will, but about letting life reveal itself as it is. When the harm of forcing outcomes becomes clear, the heart naturally turns toward a softer way of being, one that does not wound but heals, one that does not bind but frees. This is where detachment transforms into compassion. It is the point where letting go no longer feels like loss, but like love in its truest form. Love that does not clutch, does not demand, does not make the other into property, but flows freely like water, nourishing everything it touches. To love without owning is not less love. It is deeper, purer, more enduring, because it rests on freedom rather than fear. The ordinary way of loving is often entangled with grasping. You hold people tightly because you fear losing them. You attach conditions to affection. You equate love with control. This love may feel intense, but beneath its surface lies anxiety. The more you own, the more you fear being robbed. The more you cling, the more fragile the bond becomes. When detachment enters, the fear begins to dissolve. You still care, you still give, but your heart no longer tries to cage what it loves. This opens space for compassion to flourish, because compassion asks nothing in return. Compassion is love expanded. It is love that sees beyond self-interest. When detachment clears away the fog of craving, compassion shines through naturally. You no longer ask, "How can this person satisfy me?" Instead, you ask, "How can I bring ease to their suffering?" This shift deepens connection. Relationships that once strained under ownership become lighter because they are no longer burdened by conditions. The bond is not weakened by detachment, it is strengthened because it is grounded in freedom. This kind of love is not about withdrawal. Detachment does not mean coldness or indifference. It means you care fully, but without grasping. You allow the other to be themselves, to grow, to change, even to leave, without making their choices a threat to your worth. This is why it creates lasting connections, because people feel safe where they are not controlled. They trust love that does not suffocate. They return to love that does not chain them. When detachment becomes compassion, even pain transforms. Loss is still felt, but it does not destroy you. Instead of collapsing into grief because you cannot own permanence, you meet loss with understanding. You grieve with open eyes, honoring what was without demanding it stay. This compassion extends to yourself as well. You release guilt for not being able to hold on. You accept impermanence, not as cruelty, but as truth. In this way, even sorrow deepens your capacity to love. The Buddha often taught that true love is rooted in the wish for others to be free from suffering. This wish is not dependent on them meeting your needs. It is unconditional. Detachment allows you to embody this, because you are no longer trapped in craving. Compassionate love says, "May you be well, whether or not you stay, whether or not you love me back." Such love may sound rare, but it is possible, because it arises not from possession, but from the heart's natural openness when freed from attachment. This form of love also dissolves conflict. Much of the tension in relationships comes from unmet demands, expectations of behavior, promises of permanence, illusions of control. When you let go of these, peace replaces conflict. You can listen without defensiveness, support without manipulation, and forgive without keeping score. Compassionate love is resilient because it does not depend on conditions. It remains steady through change because it is not tied to ownership. Parents often discover glimpses of this love. To raise a child well is to nurture them, guide them, and then allow them to walk their own path. Clinging to control creates rebellion or dependence, but releasing into compassion allows growth. The same is true of friendships, partnerships, and communities. When you love without owning, you give the greatest gift possible, freedom to be. And in return, trust and gratitude deepen bonds more than control ever could. Detachment becoming compassion also changes how you see yourself. Often you treat yourself harshly, demanding perfection, ownership of outcomes, control of every flaw. But when you release attachment to a fixed identity, compassion turns inward. You begin to love yourself without conditions. You forgive mistakes, accept imperfections, and allow growth. This inner compassion radiates outward, because how you treat yourself shapes how you treat others. In spiritual practice, this transformation is essential. Many practitioners begin with attachment to enlightenment itself. clinging to the idea of becoming wise or peaceful. But over time, detachment softens this grasping. The practice stops being about personal achievement and becomes about compassion for all beings. The goal is no longer to escape suffering for yourself alone, but to help alleviate suffering wherever it is found. This is the natural evolution of love, when detachment clears the ground. The paradox is that detachment, which many fear will weaken love, actually strengthens it. Possessive love fades when conditions change. Compassionate love endures because it is not bound by conditions. It can hold joy and sorrow, presence and absence, gain and loss, all without breaking. It is love that expands instead of contracts, that heals instead of wounds, that endures because it is free. When detachment becomes compassion, the way you relate to the world shifts. Strangers become part of your circle of care. Enemies soften in your perception because you see their suffering beneath their actions. Even animals, plants, and the earth itself receive your attention because love no longer excludes. Compassion does not stop at boundaries. It flows endlessly outward because it does not cling inward. This is why detachment is not the end of love, but the beginning of its highest form. When you let go of ownership, love becomes limitless. It ceases to be a transaction and becomes a way of being. To love without owning is to embody the freedom you wish for yourself and for others. It is to walk in the world with a heart unchained, offering care without fear, generosity without demand, presence without possession. And in this way, compassion, rooted in detachment, is not only the purest love, but also the strongest. It cannot be broken by loss, time, or change, because it is not dependent on them. It is love that endures because it does not grasp. It is love that heals because it does not wound. It is love that liberates because it does not imprison. This is the love the Dharma calls us toward, the love that arises when the hands of clinging finally open, and what flows out is compassion without end. When love is freed from ownership and transformed into compassion, another hidden thread becomes easier to see: the deep human craving for control. Even when we stop trying to possess others, the mind still wants to direct outcomes, to bend life toward its own preferences, to believe it can manage every detail of existence. This hunger for control feels natural, even protective, but it is in truth the subtlest and strongest attachment. Control gives the illusion of safety while secretly feeding fear. The Dharma shows that surrender, not control, is the path to freedom. The desire for control arises from uncertainty. Life is unpredictable, and the mind, uncomfortable with this truth, invents strategies to shield itself. We make plans, set expectations, create systems, and cling to routines as though they can guarantee stability. Yet impermanence is always at work. No matter how much control we think we have, life unfolds according to countless conditions beyond our reach. The more we tighten our grip, the more anxious we become, because reality cannot be tamed. This is why control is such a powerful attachment. Unlike possessions or relationships, which are easier to see, control disguises itself as responsibility, strength, or wisdom. We call it discipline, management, or planning. These qualities can be useful, but when driven by fear, they become prisons. Control convinces us that if we hold tightly enough, we can avoid pain. Yet clinging to control does not prevent pain, it multiplies it, because every disruption feels like failure. In relationships, control is one of the most damaging illusions. You may not call it control, you may call it care, guidance, or protection. But when you dictate how someone should act, think, or feel, you are clinging not to love, but to the illusion of ownership. This suffocates both people. The controlled feel trapped, and the controller feels constant frustration when reality refuses to comply. Compassion cannot coexist with control, because compassion gives space. Control takes it away. Control also distorts how we see ourselves. The ego feeds on the belief that it is the master of life. I did this, it says. I made this happen. Success inflates the illusion of control, while failure feels unbearable because it threatens that identity. In truth, every outcome is the result of countless causes' effort, yes, but also timing, conditions, and the choices of others. To believe you are in full control is to ignore interdependence. To surrender this illusion is to see clearly that you are part of a vast web of causes, not the sole author of your story. The suffering of control shows itself in small ways every day. You expect the traffic to flow smoothly, the weather to match your plans, the people around you to behave as you wish. When they do not, irritation rises. These are small reminders of the truth. Reality is not yours to command. When the mind accepts this, peace arises. When it resists, suffering deepens. The irritation itself is the friction of control colliding with impermanence. Even spiritual practice can become tangled with control. Many approach meditation with the belief that they can force stillness, demand insight, or control the mind into silence. But the very act of forcing blocks the practice. True meditation is surrender, observing thoughts without clinging, allowing the mind to settle naturally. Insight arises when control relaxes, not when it tightens. This is why surrender to Dharma is essential. The path opens only when you stop demanding that it match your timetable. The illusion of control also affects how we face suffering. Pain becomes heavier when we believe we should have prevented it. Loss becomes unbearable when we think we could have controlled it. Regret grows from the illusion that we should have managed life better. But suffering is not proof of failure. It is proof of being alive in an impermanent world. To see this is to soften self-blame. To accept this is to stop fighting what cannot be controlled and to focus instead on meeting life with compassion. In the larger world, the illusion of control drives conflict. Nations try to dominate each other. Organizations cling to power. Individuals impose their will on communities. Yet, control on this scale creates cycles of resistance and suffering. The Dharma teaches interdependence. No being, no nation, no group exists in isolation. Control ignores this truth, and so it always collapses eventually. The stronger the grip, the harder the fall. History itself is filled with the lessons of failed control. To surrender control is not to abandon effort or responsibility. It is to act with clarity while accepting impermanence. You continue to plant seeds, nurture relationships, and fulfill duties, but you release the demand for total authority over outcomes. This is humility before reality. It is the recognition that life cannot be bent to your will, no matter how strong your plans. Surrender is not weakness, it is alignment with truth. The body shows the difference between control and surrender. Control tightens muscles, quickens breath, and raises the heart rate. Surrender softens the body, deepens the breath, and calms the heart. One consumes energy, the other restores it. In this way, surrender is not passive, it is active wisdom. It conserves strength for what truly matters, instead of wasting it on impossible battles. When you release control, space opens for creativity. Control narrows vision, locking you into one outcome. Surrender broadens vision, allowing you to see possibilities you would have missed. Many discoveries, insights, and connections arise not when control dominates, but when you let go of rigid plans and remain open. This openness attracts alignment, because life flows more smoothly where there is space. The deepest surrender is to Dharma itself. Dharma is the law of reality, the truth of impermanence, interdependence, and cause and effect. When you cling to control, you deny Dharma. You believe you can override truth with will. When you surrender to Dharma, you step into alignment with what already is. You stop fighting impermanence, stop denying interdependence, and stop clinging to outcomes. This surrender is liberation, because nothing can disturb you when you no longer demand control. Ultimately, the illusion of control is the ego's last fortress. To dismantle it is to step into true freedom. You see that security does not come from bending reality, but from trusting it. Peace does not come from controlling conditions, but from aligning with them. Love does not come from ownership, but from compassion. And wisdom does not come from domination, but from surrender. When this truth is lived, life becomes lighter. The storms of change no longer feel like enemies. The unpredictability of the future no longer feels like threat. You no longer waste energy trying to hold the unholdable. Instead, you walk with ease, act with clarity, and trust that Dharma carries you. In this trust, you discover that surrender was never loss. It was freedom all along. When the illusion of control finally begins to loosen its grip, the heart discovers another dimension of freedom, the quiet strength of stillness. Once you stop believing that peace comes from managing every outcome, you open to a deeper truth. Silence itself carries a wisdom that striving can never produce. Silent trust is not about doing nothing. It is about resting in alignment with reality so completely that life unfolds without the need for constant interference. This stillness speaks louder than all the frantic words and restless actions we pour into the world. Striving often looks powerful, but beneath it lies agitation. The mind races, the body tenses, and the heart never finds rest. You believe that if you just push harder, speak louder, or move faster, life will give you what you want. Yet this constant effort only reinforces the feeling of lack. Silent trust, on the other hand, comes from recognizing that reality is already in motion. You do not need to drag it forward. You only need to listen deeply, to rest in awareness, and to allow conditions to ripen naturally. In Buddhist practice, meditation is the clearest expression of this trust. You sit, you breathe, you observe. Thoughts rise and fall, emotions come and go. When you do not react, when you do not grasp or resist, a quiet power emerges. The mind becomes steady, the heart becomes open, and the body relaxes. This stillness is not emptiness in the sense of absence, it is fullness, a presence so complete that nothing needs to be added. In this silence, insights appear without effort, like ripples forming on still water. The strength of silent trust is seen in non-reactivity. When insulted, the reactive mind rushes to defend itself. When threatened, it strikes back. When praised, it clings to approval. Each reaction chains you to the actions of others, but when you rest in silence, you are free. You hear words without being captured by them. You see events without being enslaved by them. This non-reactivity is not weakness, but mastery. It allows you to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. The world often mistakes silence for passivity, but in truth, silence can be the most powerful statement. To meet anger with calm, to meet chaos with composure, to meet uncertainty with stillness, these actions shift the energy of situations more deeply than arguments or force ever could. Silent trust is not inaction. It is action without struggle. It is the quiet refusal to be pulled into cycles of fear and craving. In relationships, silent trust creates depth. Words are necessary, but constant explaining demanding, and proving erode connection. When two people can sit together in silence without discomfort, it shows a bond beyond need. Trust does not always need speech. Sometimes the absence of reaction speaks more clearly than the loudest declaration. Detachment makes this possible because you are not clinging to control or outcome. Compassion deepens it because you are fully present without imposing. Silent trust also transforms how you meet time. Striving rushes you forward, impatient for results. Silence anchors you in the present, where life is actually unfolding. This does not mean you abandon effort. It means your effort is rooted in calm rather than panic. The artist who waits in silence for inspiration, the farmer who trusts the seasons, the meditator who allows the mind to settle, all embody the same principle. Timing belongs to reality, not to control. The body itself teaches this lesson. Healing often happens most effectively in rest. Muscles repair during stillness, wounds close when the body is allowed to recover. Forcing activity too soon delays healing. The same is true for the heart and mind. Emotional wounds do not mend by constant analysis or relentless striving. They mend when silence allows space for clarity, forgiveness, and acceptance. Silent trust is the environment where true healing takes root. This trust also extends to the unfolding of karma. You cannot control how quickly results appear, nor can you dictate the shape they take. Silent trust accepts that causes and conditions ripen in their own rhythm. By resting in stillness, you allow karma to reveal itself without interference. This does not mean doing nothing. It means acting skillfully and then releasing the demand for immediate return. In this way, silence honors the truth of cause and effect more deeply than striving ever can. There is also beauty in the humility of silent trust. Striving often comes from the ego's need to prove itself. Silence, however, admits that truth is larger than you. It bows to the mystery of life instead of trying to master it. This humility is not defeat, it is liberation. It frees you from the exhausting burden of needing to control or explain everything. You begin to see that much of life's wisdom arises not when you speak, but when you listen. In meditation, this listening becomes profound. You listen not only to sounds, but to your own mind, to the quiet movements of thought and feeling. As you rest in this silence, layers of illusion fall away. The craving to control, the fear of loss, the endless narratives dissolve. What remains is awareness itself, clear, open, and steady. This awareness is the ground of silent trust. It is not passive, it is the most alive state possible. Silent trust also allows for a new relationship with uncertainty. Striving tries to resolve uncertainty by seizing control. Silence allows uncertainty to exist without panic. You learn to sit with not knowing, to breathe in mystery without needing to solve it. This ability is the heart of wisdom, because life is always uncertain. The one who can rest in that truth finds peace where others only find fear. The power of silence is not limited to meditation cushions or quiet rooms. It can be lived in every moment. It is the pause before speaking, the breath before reacting, the calm presence in a storm. It is the strength to let things come to you instead of chasing them endlessly. It is the courage to trust life without needing to wrestle with it. When silent trust deepens, life feels lighter. You no longer waste energy on constant striving. You no longer drown in endless noise. You discover that silence is not empty. It is alive with wisdom, compassion, and strength. Stillness becomes your foundation, and from that foundation, every action you take carries more clarity. This is how stillness speaks louder than striving. Striving shouts with desperation, but silence radiates with calm authority. Striving demands attention, but silence transforms simply by being present. Striving burns energy, but silence generates peace. Silent trust is not the absence of action, but the presence of harmony. It is the living expression of alignment with Dharma, where life unfolds naturally and you no longer need to force it forward. In the end, silent trust is the deepest form of faith. It is faith not in outcomes, but in the path itself. It is the recognition that peace is not something you chase, it is something you uncover by resting fully in what is. And when you live with this trust, you discover that silence was never empty, and stillness was never weakness. They were the quiet strength that carried you all along. When the strength of silent trust is discovered, something remarkable begins to unfold. You no longer see stillness as absence, but as fullness. And from this clarity comes a new understanding of waiting. What once felt like wasted time, a pause between real moments, reveals itself as one of the most fertile grounds for practice. Waiting is not emptiness, it is discipline. It is not weakness, it is wisdom. The Dharma shows that waiting, when embraced with awareness, becomes an active path of transformation. The human mind resists waiting because it is trained to chase. We are told that worth is measured by speed, results, and productivity. Waiting threatens this narrative. It feels like losing ground, like falling behind, like being forgotten. Yet, what if waiting is not delay but ripening? What if the very space you try to escape is the field where growth takes root? In the Buddhist view, waiting is not a void. It is an active state of presence, a conscious surrender to the unfolding of conditions. Every living thing teaches this truth. Seeds wait beneath the soil, not in despair but in preparation. The moon waxes and wanes in cycles, never rushed, never delayed. Even the breath itself is waiting. The pause between inhale and exhale is not wasted, but essential. Without that space, there is no rhythm. In the same way, waiting in life creates rhythm, allowing experiences to mature, wisdom to deepen, and clarity to appear. To rush is to disrupt the cycle. To wait with awareness is to align with it. The Dharma of waiting is rooted in patience, but it goes further. Patience endures, waiting participates. When you wait with awareness, you are not idle. You are actively training the mind to stay present without clinging to outcome. You are cultivating trust that conditions ripen when the time is right. You are building resilience by refusing to collapse into frustration. Waiting becomes practice when you treat it as fertile space rather than dead space. This perspective transforms daily life. Long lines, delays, pauses between opportunities, these moments often trigger irritation, but when seen through Dharma, they are invitations. In waiting, you can return to breath. In waiting, you can observe craving. In waiting, you can notice impatience itself and study how it arises and dissolves. Each delay becomes a teacher, showing you where the mind resists reality. Instead of fighting time, you learn to flow with it. Waiting also reveals attachment. The stronger the clinging to results, the more painful waiting feels. If you crave recognition, waiting for approval is torture. If you crave success, waiting for progress feels unbearable. If you crave love, waiting for reciprocation seems endless. Yet the suffering lies not in the waiting, but in the craving tied to it. When you release the demand for outcome, waiting softens. It becomes a space of freedom rather than a prison of lack. The Dharma also teaches that waiting is part of compassion. When you wait for others to grow, to understand, or to change, you honor their rhythm. You release the urge to force them into your timeline. Compassionate waiting is not passive. It is the steady offering of presence without pressure. In this way, waiting becomes a gift. It tells others, I trust you, I respect your journey, I will not demand you move before you are ready. In personal growth, waiting is essential. Transformation does not happen overnight. Insight ripens slowly, like fruit on a tree. Forcing wisdom is like pulling at branches before the fruit is mature. You may have glimpses, but true change takes time. Waiting allows the mind to settle, to integrate lessons deeply. Without waiting, practice becomes superficial. With waiting, it becomes embodied. The discipline of waiting also heals anxiety about timing. Fear of being late, fear of missing opportunities, fear of falling behind, these dissolve when you see waiting as part of the path, not a detour. The Dharma assures that nothing unfolds too early or too late. Waiting is simply the interval between planting and harvest. To see it this way is to rest in peace instead of panic. Meditation trains this directly. Sitting in silence is waiting without struggle. You wait for the breath to come, you wait for thoughts to pass, you wait for insight to arise. You cannot rush any of it. The practice is to stay, to observe, to trust. This is why meditation feels difficult at first. It confronts the restless mind that hates waiting. But the longer you sit, the more you discover that waiting itself is transformation. Stillness ripens understanding, not by force, but by time. Waiting also cultivates humility. It reminds you that you are not the master of timing. You cannot command the universe to move faster. Waiting bows to the truth that causes and conditions are larger than individual will. This humility softens ego, teaching you to live in harmony with reality rather than in battle with it. It shows you that surrender is not defeat, but wisdom. There is a hidden joy in waiting when the mind releases impatience. Freed from the pressure of outcome, you begin to notice small details often overlooked. The sound of wind, the rhythm of footsteps, the quiet of your own breath, all appear in the space waiting provides. What once felt empty becomes alive. Waiting awakens appreciation because it slows you down enough to see. This shift changes the narrative of life itself. You no longer see pauses as interruptions, but as part of the story. You stop fearing stillness and start honoring it. You stop rushing toward an imagined destination and begin living fully in the interval. Waiting is no longer wasted time, it is life itself. Ultimately, the Dharma of waiting reveals that the journey is not measured only in action, but also in rest. The path is not just in moving forward, but in pausing with awareness. Waiting is practice because it teaches presence, patience, humility, and trust. It turns delays into opportunities and silence into wisdom. When you live this way, waiting ceases to feel like punishment. It becomes a rhythm, a breathing space, a gift. You begin to see that nothing was ever delayed, nothing was ever wasted. Waiting was not an absence of life, it was life unfolding, teaching you that every moment, even the still ones, is full of Dharma. When the discipline of waiting is finally understood as fertile ground rather than wasted time, another doorway quietly opens, one that leads not only to peace, but to creation itself. For what arises in waiting is space, and space is the birthplace of inspiration. This is where detachment reveals one of its most unexpected gifts: creativity. When you stop gripping outcomes, when you release the need for certainty, you invite something larger than yourself to flow through you. Detachment is not only freedom from suffering, it is also the door through which spontaneous artistry enters. Creativity suffers most under pressure. The mind that clings to results demands perfection, fears mistakes, and tries to control every detail. In this state, ideas wither before they can breathe. The more you force brilliance, the further it retreats. This is the same truth seen across the Dharma. Forcing life creates friction. Just as clinging suffocates relationships and control breeds anxiety, attachment to outcomes strangles creativity. To loosen the grip is to allow the unexpected to emerge, because creation thrives where there is openness, not where there is fear. Artists, writers, musicians, and thinkers throughout history have spoken of inspiration as something that arrives on its own, often when least expected. It is described as a whisper, a visitation, a current flowing through rather than from them. This experience is not limited to art, it is the nature of creativity itself. Whether you are solving problems, building ideas, or simply finding new ways to live, the energy of creation comes when you stop clutching. Detachment creates the conditions for inspiration by removing the weight of demand. The Buddhist path supports this through the practice of non-attachment. By releasing the hunger for recognition, perfection, or specific results, you create the mental spaciousness where fresh insight arises. When the ego is silent, creativity speaks. When craving is absent, playfulness appears. When fear loosens, imagination blossoms. Detachment is not withdrawal from expression. It is the soil that allows expression to flourish. This can be seen clearly in meditation. When you sit in silence, thoughts drift in unexpected directions. Insights appear unbidden. Solutions emerge from stillness. You did not construct them through effort. They arose naturally when the mind was uncluttered. This is the heart of creativity. It is not manufactured, but revealed. The role of detachment is to clear the ground so that revelation can happen. Creativity also deepens when mistakes are welcomed as part of the process. Attachment to outcome breeds perfectionism, and perfectionism is the enemy of creation. It stops you before you begin, silences you before you speak, and edits you before you finish. Detachment releases this weight. It allows you to experiment, to fail, to play, to discover. In the Dharma, failure is not final, it is simply another condition that teaches. The same is true in art. Every mistake is part of the unfolding. Detachment lets you see mistakes not as threats, but as stepping stones toward discovery. This principle applies to more than art. In problem solving, detachment allows for flexible thinking. A mind locked in attachment sees only one path. A detached mind is open to alternatives. This openness is where innovation comes from. The greatest breakthroughs rarely appear through force. They arrive when someone steps back, loosens their grip, and allows the unexpected to surface. Detachment expands possibility by refusing to cling to a single vision. In relationships, too, creativity emerges when attachment softens. Conversations become more alive when you stop trying to control them. New ways of connecting appear when you release rigid expectations. Even love itself becomes creative, constantly reinventing how to express care when it is freed from ownership. Detachment makes space for novelty, for surprise, for growth. Connection becomes artistry when it is not bound by fear. The paradox is that detachment gives you access to creativity precisely because it quiets the ego. Creativity is not about the self being grand, but about the self being open. When you cling to recognition or success, you shrink the space through which inspiration flows. When you detach from these demands, you become a vessel. The art, the idea, the solution moves through you without obstruction. This is why so many describe creativity as a gift or grace. It is less about possession and more about participation. Even science echoes this truth. Studies show that people are more creative when relaxed, playful, or daydreaming states, where attachment to results is weakest. Creativity is strongest when the mind is not fixated on performance. Detachment mirrors this by training you to release the obsession with outcomes. In doing so, It aligns the mind with the natural conditions where insight arises. Detachment also changes how you view your creations. Instead of clutching them as possessions or proofs of worth, you release them into the world freely. This release keeps the flow alive. When you cling to one work, fearing judgment or loss, you block the next idea. When you detach, you create and let go, create and let go, keeping inspiration in motion. This mirrors the Dharma of impermanence. Nothing is to be clung to, not even your art. In letting go, you remain open for the new. This practice requires courage because attachment feels safe. Control gives the illusion of stability, and outcomes give the illusion of identity. But when you loosen these, you realize that true safety lies not in holding, but in trusting. Creativity thrives not in cages, but in open skies. The courage to detach is the courage to allow life to create through you, without demanding certainty. Waiting, silence, and detachment form the foundation of this creativity. Waiting gives the space, silence clears the noise, detachment removes the fear. Together, they create the conditions where artistry appears. This is not only about producing art, but about living creatively, finding new ways to meet challenges, new perspectives on ordinary life, new expressions of compassion. Creativity in this sense is not a talent for a few, but a capacity in all, awakened when the grip of attachment softens. Ultimately, detachment, as the door to creativity, teaches that the most powerful creations are not those dragged into existence by force, but those that arrive naturally when you are open. They are not the result of clinging but of surrender. They are not owned but shared. They flow from the same source as the Dharma itself, the natural unfolding of conditions when nothing obstructs. To live this way is to discover that creativity is not rare inspiration, but a constant presence waiting for space. When you loosen your grip, you feel its flow. When you stop demanding, you hear its voice. And when you let go of outcomes, you realize that the art of living itself is the greatest creation of all. When detachment opens the door to creativity and shows you the beauty of expression without clinging to outcomes, the next step reveals itself as even more radical: the release of the deepest attachment of all, the attachment to self. Every desire, every fear, every grasping ultimately traces back to this sense of I and mine. Creativity teaches you how to let go of ownership of your work. Compassion teaches you how to let go of ownership of others. But the highest liberation in Buddhism is learning to let go of ownership of self. This is the teaching of anatta, or no self, and it is the doorway to freedom beyond anything the mind can conceive. The self feels like the most permanent possession. You may question objects, relationships, even beliefs, but the sense of me seems undeniable. It feels solid, continuous, unchanging. Yet Buddhism reveals that this is illusion. What you call self is not a fixed entity, but a collection of processes: body, sensations, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. These aggregates shift every moment, arising and dissolving like waves on the ocean. To cling to them as a permanent I is to cling to shadows. The suffering that arises from defending this illusion is the root of all other attachments. Anatta does not deny that experiences occur. You feel joy, you feel pain, you think, you act. What it denies is that there is a permanent controller behind these experiences. The sense of self is a construction stitched together by memory, craving, and habit. The more tightly you identify with it, the more fragile life becomes. Every insult feels personal, every loss feels like annihilation, every success inflates the ego. But when you see the self as impermanent, these waves lose their power. Liberation comes not from building a stronger identity, but from dissolving the illusion of needing one. This teaching is difficult because it strikes at the very foundation of ordinary perception. The mind resists, asking, if there is no self, then who is reading these words? Who is practicing meditation? Who suffers and who is liberated? The Dharma answers with clarity. There is experience, but no separate owner of experience. Just as fire burns without a fire self, and rivers flow without a river self, so too do thoughts and actions arise without a fixed identity behind them. Recognizing this is not emptiness in the sense of nothingness. It is freedom from clinging to an illusion. Non-attachment to self dissolves fear. Much of human life is shaped by fear of death, fear of rejection, fear of losing identity. These fears all depend on believing the self is permanent. When you see that the self is not fixed but fluid, fear begins to fade. Death is no longer the destruction of me, but the natural transformation of processes. Insults no longer wound deeply because there is no fixed self to defend. Even success is no longer intoxicating because it is seen as transient. The chains of identity fall away, leaving peace in their place. In daily life, this realization transforms how you relate to others. When you are no longer clinging to a rigid self, you see more clearly that others, too, are processes rather than fixed identities. Their anger, kindness, flaws, and virtues are not permanent selves, but shifting conditions. This dissolves judgment and deepens compassion. How can you hate someone when you see their identity as a collection of impermanent processes shaped by causes they did not fully choose? Non-attachment to self opens the door to universal empathy. Meditation provides the clearest glimpse into anatta. As you observe the mind, you see thoughts arise without control, sensations come and go, perceptions shift moment by moment. If you watch closely, there is no solid I behind these events, only the flow of phenomena. At first, this can feel unsettling, like the ground is falling away. But with practice, it becomes liberating. You realize the ground was never solid to begin with. What falls away is illusion. What remains is openness. The teaching of no self also liberates you from the burden of self-image. Much suffering comes from trying to uphold an identity, successful, attractive, wise, spiritual. You spend energy protecting these images, fearing exposure of flaws, craving validation to reinforce them. But when you see that the self is a construction, these images lose their grip. You no longer need to be someone in order to be at peace. You are free to act authentically, without fear of breaking an identity that never existed. Non-attachment to self also transforms creativity itself. When you release the need to claim ownership, your art becomes freer. You create not to prove your worth, but to express the flow of life through you. The idea is not, I made this, but this arose. The ego steps aside, and creativity deepens. The same applies to all aspects of life. Acts of kindness, work, relationships, when done without the burden of ego, they become lighter, purer, and more genuine. The illusion of self is maintained by craving. You crave permanence, so you cling to identity. You crave recognition, so you build an image. You crave control, so you invent the idea of a self that can master reality. Seeing through this illusion dissolves craving at its root. When there is no me to protect or glorify, the cycle of desire begins to quiet. What replaces it is not emptiness, but spaciousness. Life is lived without the weight of constant self-concern. Non-attachment to self also brings equanimity in the face of change. Without clinging to identity, change is not a threat. Losing a job, aging, shifting roles, All of these are seen as natural transitions rather than attacks on the self. You still act, adapt, and grow, but without panic. Identity is fluid, so change is not destruction, it is simply transformation. This equanimity allows you to meet life's shifts with peace rather than fear. The Buddha emphasized that anatta is not a philosophy to be debated, but a truth to be realized. Intellectual understanding is not enough. Only through direct observation in meditation does the illusion of self truly dissolve. And when it does, suffering weakens at its root. This is why non-attachment to self is the deepest liberation. All other detachments free you from outer bonds, but this one frees you from the inner cage of ego itself. Ultimately, to live without attachment to self is to live with vast freedom. You no longer carry the heavy armor of identity. You no longer waste energy defending illusions. You no longer fear the dissolution of what was never solid. Instead, you live openly, compassionately, creatively, present in each moment without clinging. This is not annihilation, it is awakening. It is discovering that what you thought was self was never the source of peace. Peace was always here, uncovered when the illusion was released. When detachment extends all the way to self, life is no longer about protecting identity, but about flowing with reality. In that flow, there is freedom, there is compassion, there is joy untouched by clinging. This is the liberation the Buddha pointed toward, the freedom, not only from possessions and desires, but from the very illusion of I that binds them all together. This is the deepest letting go and the doorway to the highest peace. When the illusion of self loosens and the heart learns to rest without clinging to identity, another layer of truth quietly reveals itself. Not everything you long for is meant to come, and not every path you imagine will open. At first, this feels like loss, as though life has denied you something essential. But with deeper vision, you begin to see that absence itself carries a hidden blessing. There is a subtle joy in non-arrival, a relief in realizing that the things you thought you needed to complete, you were never required for your wholeness. The mind is trained to measure fulfillment by arrival. Success means achieving goals. Happiness means obtaining desires. Peace means reaching destinations. Yet in reality, many of the things you chase never arrive, or if they do not appear in the form you expected. When you cling to arrival as proof of meaning, disappointment feels inevitable. But when you release this demand, you discover a paradox. Non-arrival frees you. It shows you that life is not defined by the checklist of outcomes, but by the richness of being present. Absence is not emptiness in the sense of lack, it is space. The job that did not appear may have spared you from confinement in a path that was never yours. The relationship that never blossomed may have opened you to deeper self-understanding or to connections more aligned with truth. The dream that did not manifest may have saved you from a future shaped by craving rather than wisdom. Non-arrival protects as much as arrival provides. To see this is to realize that blessings are often hidden in what does not come. This shift changes how you hold desire itself. When you accept that not all desires will arrive, longing loses its sting. You still feel it, but you no longer believe it defines your worth or future. Longing becomes softer, lighter. You can smile at it, honor it, and let it pass without despair. Non-arrival becomes a teacher, showing you that peace is possible even when the world does not meet your demands. Non-arrival also reveals impermanence in another form. What you expect is not guaranteed, and what you receive is often unexpected. This uncertainty is not cruelty, it is truth. By resting in it, you discover resilience. You no longer collapse when things do not unfold as planned. You see that meaning is not tied to the arrival of specific outcomes, but to the openness of meeting each moment as it comes. The joy of non-arrival is subtle because it does not come with fanfare. It comes quietly, often years later, when you look back and realize that what did not arrive allowed space for something else. You see that a rejection opened a better door, that an absence cleared the way for growth, that an unanswered longing taught you strength you would never have found otherwise. This joy is not loud, but deep. It comes not from getting what you wanted, but from realizing you are whole, even without it. In meditation, you meet non-arrival constantly. You sit expecting peace, clarity, or insight. Sometimes they do not come. Instead, you meet restlessness, distraction, or boredom. But if you release the demand for arrival, you discover presence itself. The joy of simply being, without the arrival of special states, is profound. This lesson extends into life. Fulfillment is not tied to the arrival of ideal conditions, but to the awareness of what is here now. Non-arrival also humbles the ego. The ego wants constant affirmation through achievements, possessions, or recognition. When these do not arrive, the ego feels wounded. But this wound can be a gateway. It shows you that your worth is not dependent on outcomes. It teaches you to rest in being rather than in accomplishment. This humility is freedom. You are no longer enslaved to the endless chase for arrival because you see that peace does not depend on it. The Dharma invites you to see non-arrival not as failure, but as part of the unfolding. Just as some seeds never sprout, not every longing becomes reality. Yet, this does not diminish the field of life, it enriches it. For the space left by non-arrival is the ground where awareness grows. It pushes you inward, toward wisdom, rather than outward toward endless craving. The absence itself becomes practice, teaching you to rest in presence instead of in promise. Relationships reveal this truth clearly. Not every bond will deepen, not every love will be returned. Yet the absence of what you imagined does not mean absence of love. It may lead you to see love in broader forms through friendship, community, compassion for strangers, or connection with life itself. The heart expands when it stops demanding arrival in one form. Non-arrival becomes the doorway to a wider, freer love. Even suffering is shaped by non-arrival. Much of your pain arises not from what is present, but from what is absent. Opportunities not taken, words not spoken, moments not lived. But when you see that life could never give you every possibility, you stop clinging to ghosts. You begin to value the paths you did walk, instead of being haunted by the ones you did not. In this way, non-arrival becomes a teacher of gratitude. The subtle joy of non-arrival is not about rejecting dreams or abandoning effort. It is about releasing the demand that every effort must bear fruit. You still plant seeds, you still live with sincerity, but you stop measuring life by what arrives. You discover peace in the planting itself, joy in the journey itself. Arrival becomes a gift, not a requirement. Non-arrival becomes a teacher, not a punishment. Ultimately, the Dharma of non-arrival shows that freedom is not in achieving every desire, but in realizing you do not need to. Life is vast, unpredictable, full of arrivals and absences alike. When you stop clinging to what did not come, you open to the richness of what is here. The joy is subtle because it is not tied to gain, but to release. It is the quiet happiness of knowing that your wholeness does not depend on arrival. When you live this truth, absence no longer feels like loss. It feels like space, like possibility, like hidden blessing. The joy of non-arrival is not the joy of getting everything you want, but the joy of realizing you are free from needing it. And in that freedom, even absence shines. When the quiet blessing of non-arrival is finally understood, Another danger becomes easier to see: the temptation to make even spirituality itself into something to grasp. If the mind cannot get what it longs for in one place, it often shifts its craving elsewhere, and spiritual practice becomes the next target. Instead of release, it becomes another possession, another badge of pride, another way to measure worth. This is the subtle trap of spiritual materialism, and it can be more binding than the ordinary attachments you thought you left behind. Detachment is the antidote, for only when you release the urge to own spirituality can you truly live its truth. Spiritual materialism arises whenever practice becomes a tool for ego. You meditate, not for liberation, but to appear calm. You read scriptures, not to deepen wisdom, but to prove superiority. You pursue teachings, not to dissolve self, but to build a stronger one. The craving for identity does not vanish simply because you turn toward the spiritual path. In fact, it can grow more cunning. Instead of craving wealth or recognition, you begin to crave enlightenment as though it were a prize, a possession to display. The Dharma becomes another decoration on the altar of ego. This trap is dangerous because it hides beneath sincerity. You believe you are walking the path of release, but craving still drives you. The mind whispers, "Look how spiritual I am, look how much I have achieved." It compares, competes, and clings, all while pretending to be free. This is why detachment is essential. To detach is to let go even of your image as a seeker, even of your desire to be recognized as awakened. Detachment reminds you that the goal is not to add layers of identity, but to dissolve them. The Buddha himself warned against clinging to practices as possessions. The Dharma is likened to a raft, something to cross the river, not something to carry on your back once you have reached the other side. Yet many hold on to the raft with pride, showing it to others, polishing it endlessly, while never stepping onto the far shore. This is spiritual materialism, turning the means of liberation into another form of bondage. Detachment is the wisdom of letting the raft go when it has served its purpose. One form of spiritual materialism is attachment to teachers and traditions. Respect and devotion are valuable, but when they become rigid identity, they block growth. You cling to being part of a certain lineage, or you compare traditions to prove yours is superior. Instead of releasing ego, you use spirituality to feed it. Detachment does not mean disrespect. It means seeing teachers as guides rather than possessions, traditions as paths rather than trophies. Another form is attachment to experiences, a vision in meditation, a feeling of bliss, a moment of deep silence. These are natural fruits of practice, but when clung to, they become chains. You measure every meditation against them, chasing the same state as though enlightenment could be bottled. But the Dharma is not about repeating experiences. It is about seeing through illusion. Detachment allows you to appreciate experiences without mistaking them for final truth. Spiritual materialism also shows up in communities. People compete to show who practices more, who knows more, who is closer to enlightenment. The path becomes a ladder rather than a circle of support. But the Dharma is not about being above others. It is about realizing there is no separate self at all. Detachment cuts through competition because it releases the need to measure. True practice is not about ranking, but about freedom. The danger of spiritual materialism is that it blocks compassion. When spirituality becomes possession, others are seen as rivals or as tools for validation. Detachment restores compassion by reminding you that the path is not about building a greater self, but about dissolving self into connection. Compassion flows naturally when you stop using spirituality as a shield of superiority and start living it as a practice of humility. Detachment also dissolves the craving for quick attainment. The ego wants enlightenment now, as another accomplishment. But enlightenment is not an object to grab. It is the dissolution of the one who grabs. To crave enlightenment as a possession is to miss its nature entirely. Detachment protects you from this trap by teaching you to walk the path without obsession for the goal. You practice because practice itself is freedom, not because you want to own liberation. In daily life, detachment as antidote to spiritual materialism means practicing quietly, without display. It means meditating without posting about it, helping others without demanding recognition, studying Dharma without needing to appear wise. It means embodying the teachings in action rather than in identity. The greatest teachers are often those who speak least of themselves because they have no need to advertise what they live. This does not mean you must abandon practice or deny joy in it. It means holding it lightly without turning it into proof of self. You bow to the Dharma, but you do not cling to being a Dharma person. You chant, meditate, or serve, but you do not use these as ornaments of ego. Detachment transforms practice from decoration into liberation. Meditation itself is training against spiritual materialism. Each time a thought arises, I am doing well, I am failing, I am progressing, you see it and release it. You learn to practice without making an identity out of practice. Over time, this carries into life. You no longer define yourself by being spiritual or unspiritual. You simply live in alignment with truth, free of labels. The subtle joy of non-arrival taught that peace is not found in everything working out. In the same way, detachment teaches that spirituality is not about adding more to yourself. It is about subtracting the illusions that keep you bound. When you let go of using spirituality as possession, you find that true practice is simple, humble, and free. It does not make you someone greater, it makes you someone lighter. Ultimately, detachment as antidote to spiritual materialism brings you back to the heart of Dharma. The path is not a competition, not a decoration, not a badge of honor. It is the steady letting go of clinging, the gentle release of illusion, the quiet cultivation of compassion. When spirituality is no longer owned, it becomes alive. When it is not possessed, it possesses you in the best sense, filling your life with freedom, clarity, and peace. In this way, detachment protects the purity of practice. It keeps you from turning the medicine into poison, the path into prison, the Dharma into identity. And in that protection, it returns you to what the Buddha intended all along, not to become more, but to become free. After walking through these teachings, one truth echoes above all others. Peace comes not from chasing, forcing, or clinging, but from trusting the natural rhythm of life. Detachment is not coldness, it is freedom. It is the sharp mind that sees through illusions, the steady body that walks with patience, the open heart that loves without owning, and the quiet spirit that rests in timing beyond control. Desire dissolves, waiting ripens, silence heals, and even non-arrival carries hidden blessings. And when control itself is surrendered, what returns is deeper than anything the ego could demand: clarity, compassion, and freedom. So the next time you feel restless about what has not yet come, remember, if it is meant for you, it will arrive when the causes are ready, and if it does not, that too is a gift. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these lessons touched you the most? Was it the freedom of letting go, the patience of waiting, or the joy of loving without ownership? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know how these teachings land in your own journey. And if these insights gave you value, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next teaching. more wisdom is waiting, and together we'll keep walking this path of freedom.